Chapter 2668 2668 Ambush. Chapter 2668 2668 Ambush. 2668 Ambush. Husband, you are mistaken by thinking like this, Li Sikhan said. All of us are particularly aware of your strength, but my Yuhai had no idea. Shui Yenyu nodded immediately. That's right. Although my Yuhai is not your match, from his point of view, he probably thought that you were equivalent to one at the peak of the ninth heaven. Bewitching Maiden Ro continued. However, he likely surmised that if you met a monarch star, or even a supreme monarch star at the peak of the ninth heaven, then you wouldn't be his match. So, my Yuhai must have engaged such an elite. All the women reached the same conclusion. Ling Han laughed. Conventionally, my battle prowess indeed appears to be only at the late stage of the ninth heaven. However, with the eruption of power from either the 9 transformations, divine scroll, or 5 elements, lightning technique, I could take on even a supreme monarch star at the peak of the ninth heaven. Furthermore, I still have the indestructible heaven scroll when it is activated. My physique is comparable to divine metal, so escaping definitely won't be a problem. You will be going for this appointment? All the women looked at Ling Han. Even the Empress stopped cultivating and gazed at him in wonder. Ling Han nodded. I also want to take this opportunity to get rid of Ma Yuhai in order to prevent him from creating more trouble for me. At the end of the day, he is a disciple of the Martial Academy, so if this leaks out, Helian Xuanxue said hesitantly. The Martial Academy did not object to healthy competition among its disciples, and it wouldn't even matter if one was to bully others. As long as the gap in cultivation level did not exceed 2 levels, then they could horse around however they wanted. However, the bottom line was that one absolutely couldn't kill or maim another. The people here might become part of the main forces resisting hysteria in the future, so how could they be allowed to get hurt in an internal strife? Ling Han thought for a moment. I will assess the situation. I will kill if I can, but if I can't, then I will kill him in the future. Ling Han was certain that Ma Yuhai had invited him out of the Martial Academy with the intention of killing him. Facing such a person, Ling Han naturally wanted the other party dead. Of course, it would be best to be able to kill him this time, but if he couldn't, then he would just keep it in mind first. He absolutely wouldn't be letting him go. 3 days later, Ling Han set off towards Great Fiery Mountain. Great Fiery Mountain was located in the west of the Martial Academy, and the journey there would take about 2 hours. Of course, this was calculated based on the pace of Ling Han's stroll. The average Celestial King would need to be running and still take more time than this. If they wanted to arrive on time for their appointments, they had to set off even earlier. Ling Han strolled at a leisurely pace, stepping on the regulations of space, whereby a single step covered a boundless distance. He appeared to be absent-minded, yet everything happening in his surroundings was actually under his supervision. Even a tiny bit of movement couldn't escape his vision. Ling Han let out a low hum in surprise. The day was originally clear and sunny, yet it seemed to have turned into a dark night all of a sudden, and it was pitch black everywhere. Not only had the environment darkened, but it seemed that divine sense had also been restricted and could only be released up to a distance of no more than 50 kilometers away. Any further than that, it was as if it had hit a dam and would bounce back immediately. Ling Han stopped in his tracks and crossed his hands behind his back, neither in a hurry nor in a state of panic. Pa, 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 the sound of applause was heard, and a hunched old man came out, looking like he was not far from death. But Ling Han didn't dare to underestimate him at all. He sensed that this old man was like an ancient, vicious creature, with murderous aura rising sky-high, incomparably formidable. You can still be so calm in the face of sudden change. Truly, that is rarely seen in my lifetime, the old man commented. Ling Han smiled lightly. Since I have the strength, why should I be nervous? Even if you have countless different moves, I can resolve it with a single punch. Ha ha ha, well said. The old man laughed, and then coughed violently. However, little guy, do you think your strength is enough? It ought to fall short slightly in comparison to yours, but everyone has their own ultimate technique, and once the ultimate technique is launched, then it is difficult to say who is stronger. Ling Han smiled. Old sir, how should I address you? Qin Shuang. The old man stared at Ling Han, and his eyes gradually lit up as his oppressive power kept getting stronger. Ma Yuhai asked you to take action? Ling Han asked another question, was idle anyway. Yes, for a heavenly venerate pill, which I'm very satisfied with. Qin Shuang didn't bother concealing the fact. Little guy, are you committing suicide, or do you want me to take action? Oh, why should I commit suicide without reason? Ling Han said with a smile. Because if I am to take action, then you will die very miserably. Qin Shuang said menacingly, his gaze glinting coldly, with spasmodic chills and full of murderous aura. Ling Han wasn't bothered. As I have said just now, I may not be as strong as you, but once we fight and an ultimate technique is launched, then it is hard to say who is stronger. Looks like you are determined to have me take action. Qin Shuang stood up and moved towards Ling Han. His hand stretched out and was transformed into a huge black palm, exuding a cold silver radiance as multiple seals appeared one after another, and emitting an overwhelmingly powerful oppressive force. This was an overlord of the ninth heaven. Ling Han intended to test the opponent's strength, so he mustered up his power and delivered it in a punch to counter the attack. Boom! In the midst of a huge explosion, Ling Han burst out like a cannonball. Pung, pung, pung. He broke through several mountain peaks in a row. He ultimately came to a stop, not because it was the end of the path, but rather it was due to him hitting an incomparably sturdy invisible wall which blocked him. This is the little Tianyuan Great Captive Formation. As long as one is a celestial king, it is impossible to leave if one is already trapped in it. Qin Shuang walked over from the distance, step by step. He had the absolute upper hand in this exchange. Only this core stone in my hand can unlock the Great Formation, so you can forget about escaping. By the way, this formation has isolated space and is a small world by itself. It is impossible for the people outside to find out that a battle is going on here. Qin Shuang said slowly with a cruel expression on his face, just like a cat toying with a mouse. A long, long time ago, he had been the most brutal murderer. Countless elites and prodigies had died by his hands. Although he had behaved himself for the past few trillion years, his true nature remained unchanged, and now his bloodlust was aroused. According to the information that Qin Shuang had obtained, this person by the name of Ling Han was extremely freakish, with an evolution index of 12, yet his cultivation level was only at the 7th heaven. He defeated Ma Yuhai with a single blow through the eruption of some kind of secret technique. Although Qin Shuang was a little curious, he didn't take it to heart, because he was a monarch star at the peak of 9th heaven after all. Ling Han drew out Divine Demon Sword. The opponent's strength was indeed too big, so there was no need to use his own shortcomings to counter the strengths of his opponent. Celestial Tool. Qin Shuang frowned, but thereafter he immediately relaxed, as he also possessed a celestial tool. He also took out his own celestial tool, which was a saw blade. One could still see specks of blood on it, and it was extremely offensive to the eye. Some stains were as deeply cold as ice. Some were like raging flames, and some were like flashing thunder. This was due to him having killed too many powerful celestial kings, so the inextinguishable blood essence of these celestial kings had coagulated on his celestial tool. Die. Qin Shuang moved forward again to attack. He was already in front of Ling Han in a single step and slashed at him with his sword. Terrible murderous aura was flaring up. Wielding a sword in hand, Qin Shuang seemed to have changed into a different person. With the fluttering of his gray hair, there wasn't any trace of old age at all. Ling Han brandished his sword to counter the attack. Boom! 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 As the celestial tools clashed, they raised a boundless storm. Under such overwhelming, murderous aura, the regulations of the surrounding area were all being cut off and smashed. Qin Shuang laughed. He was a ninth heaven celestial king, after all, and his ability to control the regulations superseded that of Ling Han. He stretched out his hand to grab, and all regulations close and afar were immediately plucked out by him, with this move directly causing Ling Han to be unable to utilize any regulations. Chapter 2669 2669 Suffering Consequences of His Own Actions. Chapter 2669 2669 Suffering Consequences of His Own Actions. 2669 Suffering Consequences of His Own Actions. For other seventh heaven celestial kings, this was fatal. The reason why celestial kings were so strong was because they stood at the level of regulations and could directly draw and use regulations, issuing punishment on behalf of the heaven and earth. Why was there saying that the celestial king tier was divided into 9 levels, with each level bringing one closer to ascending the heavens, then? It was also because of regulations. It was just like what Qin Shuang was doing now as he directly dispersed the regulations in the surroundings. With his higher cultivation level, he naturally could draw on regulations of heaven and earth from a wider range, but Ling Han could not. A celestial king whose regulations had been stripped from him, how much stronger would he be compared to a severing mundane tier? Ha 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 ha. Qin Shuang laughed maniacally, brandishing his saw blade as he approached. No matter how strong Ling Han's secret technique was, it was useless. As long as there were no regulations Ling Han could draw on, he was just a dead bug. Qin Shuang could take his life with a single strike. Ling Han was unmoved. Waving the divine demon sword, he went forth to greet Qin Shuang. Boom! The 2 celestial tools clashed, instantly inciting a powerful shockwave, and Qin Shuang's figure swayed and quivered before being sent flying. He paled in shock and was filled with complete confusion. He had actually fallen into a disadvantage in terms of power. How could this be? It should be known that Ling Han had not been able to match Qin Shuang at all in the previous exchanges. The gap between them was not just a little bit. Why, then, was it that when things had turned this way, it was Qin Shuang that had become outmatched instead? Ling Han's strength had suddenly spiked. That was not it, Qin Shuang immediately thought. With his insight, he naturally could assess immediately that Ling Han's power had not increased at all. Instead, there was even a slight decline. The one who had changed was Qin Shuang himself. His power had fallen too greatly. That was very normal. Though Qin Shuang could still extract regulations, they were still coming from a farther area, after all. Originally, there was nothing wrong with this. Even if Qin Shuang could only extract just 10% of the power of regulation, faced with Ling Han who could draw none, he would enjoy a completely one-sided, crushing advantage. The problem here now was that Ling Han's power had completely not declined because he was not able to extract regulations. But Qin Shuang, on the other hand, was experiencing a great loss of strength due to being able to draw on only a smaller amount of regulations. With this comparison, he was actually no match for Ling Han in terms of power. Once he figured this out, Qin Shuang felt both shock and regret. He was shocked. Ling Han had to have also cultivated body arts, and that was why he could still be so powerful when he could not draw and use regulations. But this brat's body art was too domineering. It could actually stand at the same level as regulations, or was even slightly stronger than that. What Qin Shuang regretted was that he had destroyed the space in their surroundings himself, damaging the regulations in their vicinity. Pushing himself into a muddy swamp, wasn't he an idiot? Thanks, Ling Han quipped, adding fuel to the fire. Qin Shuang's face flushed red involuntarily. This was really too ironic. Previously, he had been acting all high and mighty, looking like he was confident and that everything was under his control, and thinking that he would be able to kill Ling Han with just a single strike. Yet the result was completely the opposite. To say nothing of killing Ling Han, he himself had suffered a minor loss. Qin Shuang roared in fury, pointing the saw blade in his hand at Ling Han. "You little brat, you actually dare mock me. How dare you? What is it? You have come to kill me, and I still have to treat you with respect? Am I a fool? Or are you the one who is asking for punishment?" Ling Han's tongue was merciless. This had come from time spent with a large black dog. His skill at insulting was definitely not inferior to his battle prowess. Qin Shuang was so infuriated that his gray hair fluttered windlessly. He did not waste any more words with Ling Han and delivered another strike with his saw blade. Ling Han was unafraid. Not only did he brandish the divine demon's sword to meet this oncoming strike, his left hand clenched into a fist, launching a mad barrage of punches at Qin Shuang. At that moment, Ling Han was in an absolutely aggressive stage and was completely capable of beating down on Qin Shuang. Qin Shuang was feeling extremely gloomy. His strength was far superior to Ling Han's, but because he had not expected that Ling Han had actually cultivated a frightening body art as well, the result was a starting on the wrong foot that had led to him losing the whole game. At present, he could only be thrashed helplessly. Very quickly, Qin Shuang was beaten beyond recognition. However, he was a peak stage 9th Heaven Monarch star, after all, and also had control of this great formation. He was presently refreshing the space in this area. Once the space changed, regulations would naturally return to their original state. By then, Qin Shuang would still be the high and mighty overlord of the 9th Heaven, while Ling Han would also be beaten back to his original state. With the help of a celestial tool, Qin Shuang could just barely hold up. After paying the price of having 3 punches from Ling Han land on him, he finally extracted the regulations from a different space and switched them out. Immediately, calm was reinstated into the chaos of regulations. "Brat, you will pay for this." Qin Shuang roared furiously. He had sustained 3 punches from Ling Han, and even with his strength, one of his ribs, hip bones, and shoulder bones had been broken. He was unable to heal himself even after a long period of time. However, now that regulations were reinstated, his injuries immediately healed, and a vicious light shone from his eyes. "You have angered me completely." Previously, he had been repeatedly calling himself Old Man, and now that he was extraordinarily infuriated, he naturally could no longer be bothered. He only had one thought in mind: take Ling Han down, torture him to his heart's content, and then finally kill him. Ling Han laughed loudly. A minor character that stays in the shadows, only versed in sneak attacks and ambushes. If this was a battle of equal cultivation levels, I would be able to kill you with a single finger. As for now, I will need to exert a little bit more effort. Qin Shuang suppressed his fury, approaching as he brandished his saber in his right hand, while his left hand grabbed on a streak of great Tao, which turned into a divine staff, smashing down on Ling Han. This was a display of his real battle prowess. Ling Han smiled faintly. His present battle prowess had also advanced to the 9th Heaven. Even if he could not match a peak stage 9th Heaven Monarch star, they were both at the same cultivation level. Any further than that, it would be pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. Then, so what if he was a slight bit weaker if they were both at the same level? Boom! 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 The 2 great elites clashed. Ling Han did not shrink back in the slightest. Every strike was a clash of strength with Qin Shuang. In terms of battle prowess, Ling Han was indeed outmatched. Furthermore, he was at a greater disadvantage. However, in terms of physique, Ling Han was overwhelmingly tough. The only one in the Celestial King tier that could surpass him in this area was Heavenborn. The large black dog was another. After all, he, too, had cultivated indestructible Heaven's scroll. Hence, while it was true that his battle prowess was outclassed, Ling Han practically did not suffer any damage. Qin Shuang only wielded a saw blade, and he wanted to wound Ling Han with his own battle prowess. it would be difficult. In fact, in the state Ling Han was in while channeling the indestructible heaven scroll, he was completely capable of taking a celestial tool head-on. However, as long as he was not a heavenly venerate yet, he could only channel the indestructible heaven scroll for only around 2 hours. 10 strikes, 100, 1,000. Ling Han was extremely tenacious. I have to admit that you are the strongest 7th heaven I have ever seen. Qin Shuang suddenly stopped his attacks, seeming to admire Ling Han very much. Yet Ling Han shook his head. Among the 9th heavens I have met before, you yourself cannot be ranked in the top 10. For example, the large black dog, Du Shi, Amu, the Imperial Void, Celestial King, and so Onani, one of them was stronger than Qin Shuang. Qin Shuang's mouth involuntarily twitched. He was passing judgment like this because he was on a superior level and was looking down on Ling Han from a lofty position. But now that Ling Han spoke, Qin Shuang was directly demeaned and sent to rock bottom. So how was he able to continue maintain his noble, lofty attitude? This brat's tongue was even more frightening than his battle prowess. Bad-mouthed brat, you have truly angered me. Qin Shuang's whole body was trembling as a golden light exuded from his eyes. It was like tears cascading down endlessly. Not only that, his hair also turned from gray to golden, and his skin became taut from its previous loosened state, turning golden as well. His stooped, aged figure reverted to an erect posture. The present him seemed to have transformed from an old man in his 60s to 70s into a young man all of a sudden. Ling Han's eyes flashed coldly. You're finally going to bring out your full strength now. When one had reached the Celestial King tier, which of them did not have an unlimited lifespan and no longer had to fear the immortals' tribulation? So, how could a Celestial King possibly look like Qin Shuang? Thus, it was either that there was something mentally wrong with him and he deliberately disguised himself this way, or that he was cultivating some kind of strange cultivation technique, and this was the result of such cultivation. Chapter 2670. 2670, Who is the Prey? Chapter 2670. 2670, Who is the Prey? 2670, Who is the Prey? Ha ha ha. Qin Shuang burst out into laughter. By now his figure was tall and erect, sturdy and golden all over. Everyone thought that I, Qin Shuang, hid myself in the martial academy, placing myself in the service of He Yufeng because I was being hunted. This is indeed one of the reasons, but the primary reason is for me to cultivate this divine feather holy metal technique. And now I have already reached small accomplishment level. So let me test my might on you, brat. Bouncing off his feet, Peng, his whole person immediately shot out, his speed exceedingly high. Huh. Ling Han was surprised. This burst of power from Qin Shuang had not used the regulations of space, with him speeding up as he traversed through different space. Instead, it was that the speed of his physical body was too high. The degree of speed that cultivators could use was determined by 2 factors. Firstly, extreme speed, and secondly, the tolerance level of the physical body. That was because the physical body would sustain a terrifying amount of pressure in high-speed movement, and even a celestial king could possibly be torn apart by this kind of pressure. Hence, for most celestial kings, their actual speed was far from reaching extreme speed. But just now, Qin Shuang's speed had definitely surpassed extreme speed, or rather, it had surpassed the extreme speed that he had previously maintained. And that was because he had transformed his body into metal, so his physique became extremely tough. This speed was too high. When Ling Han reacted, Qin Shuang had already pounced right in front of him, sweeping out with his blade. Ling Han could just barely raise the divine demon sword to parry the strike. Wang. The celestial tools clashed, creating a terrifying shock wave. Peng, peng, peng. Havoc was wreaked in space again, destroying the regulations in this space. Qin Shuang shouted loudly and sent out another palm strike, aiming right for Ling Han's chest. Ling Han channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, taking this strike head-on. Clang! The attack landed and Ling Han was instantly sent flying, whereas Qin Shuang erupted into laughter. He grabbed over new regulations from a different space for another switch. Ling Han was sent flying backwards, directly crashing into the borders of this great formation before being forcefully stopped. Seals were flickering on his chest, and they dimmed only after a long period of time. He felt a slight boiling sensation in his chest and an itch in his throat. He wanted to spit out a mouthful of blood. He had already channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll, yet he was actually still beaten to the point that he was almost throwing up blood. The might of this attack was truly shocking. This is a technique that was created by a pseudo-heavenly venerate. Qin Shuang laughed loudly. When I fled into the martial academy and pled for the protection of He Yufeng, it was because I had killed the only son of a pseudo-heavenly venerate and was just waiting for things to blow over. Additionally, I would have time to cultivate this precious heavenly venerate technique. Realization dawned on Ling Han. No wonder the other party could breach the defenses of the indestructible Heaven Scroll with a single strike. It was because this was a pseudo-heavenly venerate technique. But because it included the word pseudo, it naturally could not compare with a real heavenly venerate technique. Thus, it had only caused enough impact to induce a boiling sensation in Ling Han's chest, and had not really injured his internal organs. This guy was really outrageously bold. He dared to kill even the only son of a pseudo-heavenly venerate. Ling Han scratched his head. To think he was talking about someone else. Wasn't he himself that kind of person as well? Moreover, if he killed anyone, he would definitely not submit to someone else and become a servant. I have indeed overestimated you. You are nothing but a lackey. Ling Han's expression was filled with disdain. Qin Shuang was enraged. He had cultivated a precious pseudo-heavenly venerate technique and was a peak stage 9th heaven monarch star, invincible in the celestial king tier. Yet a puny 7 heaven celestial king actually dared to mock him like this. Die! Qin Shuang charged out once more. Ling Han chuckled. This time, he made absolutely no attempt to dodge or evade. Just when Qin Shuang came close enough, Xiao, a black shadow suddenly shot out of Ling Han's chest, going forth to meet Qin Shuang. Clang! In an exchange of blows, Qin Shuang was instantly sent flying outwards. Ayahu! The black shadow took the form of a large dog. Who else could it be but the damn large black dog? You want to kill Grandpa Dog's human pet, but have you asked Grandpa Dog for permission first? The large black dog stood on his hind legs, going into the posture of preparing to throw a punch. Light glinted on his iron underwear, and accompanied by his perverse expression, he looked extraordinarily despicable. Ling Han couldn't help but shoot out his foot in a kick. Damn dog, whom are you calling a human pet? You are actually in the martial academy. Qin Shuang was stunned. He had investigated Ling Han's information in close detail, and knew that he was friends with the large black dog. But the large black dog was clearly not in the martial academy. So how could he suddenly appear? Grandpa Dog is supremely clever and knew that someone was scheming against my underling. So Grandpa Dog came back to destroy this couple of trash, the large black dog answered as he crossed his paws behind him, expressing how clever he was and how everything was under his control. Ling Han wanted to kick him again. It was clear that this damn dog had failed in robbing a pseudo-heavenly venerable tier precious formation, and that was why he had fled back to the martial academy. Ling Han had initially planned to show up for the appointment alone. In any case, it would not be difficult for one of his strength to leave. However, the large black dog had volunteered himself, so Ling Han brought him along. Qin Shuang frowned, but immediately looked confident again. So what if there is another one of you? I only have to expend a little more effort. He charged out once more, sweeping out his blade in another slash and appearing extremely confident in himself. In front of Grandpa Dog, trash like you thinks you can be arrogant. The large black dog shot out a paw and struck, taking the celestial tool head-on. Pum, pum, pum. When one had reached the height of the ninth heaven, he would be equal with regulations, and a celestial tool only represented the strongest destructive power at the level of regulations. Thus, a ninth heaven celestial king had completely no need to fear a celestial tool. With regulations entwined around them, taking a celestial tool head-on was only a small matter. The two great ninth heaven celestial kings exchanged blows. It could be seen that the large black dog very soon got the upper hand. In his last life, he had followed the karmic life heavenly venerable and cultivated a supreme cultivation technique. However, limited by his aptitude, he could not cultivate the indestructible heaven scroll and was also unable to take that last step. However, after the karmic life heavenly venerable died, he used a secret technique, discarding his last life of his own volition, and nurtured a new life in his old body. This process really was fraught with fatal danger. The black dog had successfully begun his second life. This was different from Jiwuming. He had not reincarnated, but had rather been reborn on the foundations of his old body. The difficulty of this was even greater, but the range of qualitative change would also be greater. For the present large black dog, his evolution index should have directly spiked to 12, and there was an extremely great chance that he would be able to push open the doors to the heavenly venerable tier. The large black dog howled. It was not enough that he had the upper hand now. He was still continuously spouting insults. That was how extremely mean he was. If Ling Han's skill at insults could only be considered the introductory level, the large black dog had really reached the level of great accomplishment. Qin Shuang's gloominess could be imagined. Not only did he have to be thrashed physically by the large black dog, havoc was also wreaked within his spirit as well. This caused the pressure on him to be as heavy as a mountain. They had not been fighting for very long before he lost all his fighting spirit. Qin Shuang decided to flee. Otherwise, it was possible that he would die from his own fury right here. He had hold of the core of the formation. With a single thought, the great formation would be immediately removed. Xiao, his figure moved and was just about to flee. I was just waiting for you. Ling Han smirked coldly. Pum! He pushed off strongly with his feet, his body art completely activated as he shot towards Qin Shuang as rapidly as a shooting star, slashing out with the divine demon sword. Qin Shuang was completely focused on breaking free, so he had no wish to drag things out with Ling Han. He pushed out a palm to strike Ling Han, wanting to send the latter backwards. He did not dare to use his full power, or it was possible that he would not be able to burst out with full speed when the large black dog caught up to him. That would be terrible. Yet, when the divine demon's sword sliced towards him, Qin Shuang suddenly realized that there was something off. Ling Han's strike was actually more than 100 times stronger than it had been before. How was this possible? Qin Shuang's expression changed drastically, but it was already too late for him to switch to another move or increase the power of his strike. Shua! The sword swept past, and one of his arms was instantly severed, and the course of the sword did not stop. It continued to sweep past the left side of his ribs, leaving behind a deep wound. Chapter 2671. 2671. Never expected this, right? Chapter 2671. 2671. Never expected this, right? 2671. Never expected this, right? Qin Shuang yelled in pain. The damage this attack caused to him was truly too great. However, Ling Han's offensive did not end at that. Ling Han raised his left hand, and nine-colored light flickered as he pressed his palm down on Qin Shuang. Qin Shuang was already no longer capable of changing his course, so he could only take this strike head-on. Clang! His palm landed, and Qin Shuang's whole person exploded. The might of this strike was in no way inferior to the slash from the divine demon sword. Ling Han panted, but his movements did not pause. Picking up his sword, he continued his pursuit. Qin Shuang had indeed been blasted quite badly, his whole person torn into pieces. However, his head was still complete, so he did not die. For celestial kings, this was not a fatal injury. As long as Qin Shuang was given some time, he would be able to regrow his limbs and recover his battle prowess very quickly. Ling Han had used the 9 transformations divine scroll in the first strike, increasing his battle prowess countless times over, and he had channeled the 5 elements lightning technique in his second strike. Though he had not channeled the 2 heavenly venerate techniques at the same time, the gap between his use of them was really too short, so it still caused his blood to bubble and made him feel very terrible. But now was not the time for rest. He should take the chance to follow up on his attack and kill his enemy in a single stroke. How was a head going to compete with Ling Han in speed? Ling Han caught up to him and followed up with a strike from his sword. Pooh! Qin Shuang's head was pierced right through with the divine demon sword. His mind crumbled and he ultimately died. Ling Han withdrew his sword and grabbed out with both hands. He immediately grabbed over the spatial god tool that Qin Shuang had carried on him. This formation technique is not bad. In the future, Grandpa Dog will no longer have to worry that anyone will be able to flee from him. The large black dog took away the core that controlled the formation that Qin Shuang had on him. He began to eagerly stow the formation away. Ling Han was also interested in this formation, but the large black dog couldn't just help him for nothing, after all. Otherwise, it would be difficult to ask him for help again in the future. Ling Han extended his divine sense into Qin Shuang's spatial god tool and did a sweep. An alchemical pill appeared in his hand. Though he was already a 5-star alchemist, he still could not recognize this alchemical pill. However, he could be certain that there was a powerful aura contained within. In fact, it was superior even to great celestial king-tier pills. Thinking back to what Qin Shuang had previously said, about how he had moved out because he had received a heavenly venerate pill from Ma Yuhai, then this was the heavenly venerate pill. Heavenly venerate pill, what is its use? Ling Han knew this was something good, but did not know its exact effects. What heavenly venerate pill? Quick, give it to Grandpa Dog. The large black dog immediately leaped over, stretching out his paw shamelessly. Ling Han hurriedly stowed away the heavenly venerate pill. Scram, you have already taken a formation technique, and you still want this as well. This is a treasure after all. The more, the better. The large black dog was extremely shameless. It was impossible to make him feel conscientious. Ling Han only gave him the middle finger. Only then did the large black dog say, "A heavenly venerate pill is a biological, precious medicine concocted when a heavenly venerate extracts his own blood essence, combined with his personal martial intent. It would be greatly beneficial even to celestial kings. However, it would be best if Grandpa Dog ingested it. It can help Grandpa Dog advance into the heavenly venerable tier much sooner." Ling Han merely chuckled. This damn dog's eyes were spinning endlessly when he was talking. Who the fuck would believe him? Ling Han stowed away Qin Shuang's celestial tool. The large black dog also helped him to suppress it, erasing the martial intent contained within, and making it easier for the divine demon's sword to devour it. On this point, the large black dog did not say anything, because the issue of whether the divine demon's sword could advance to become a heavenly venerate tool was a matter that implicated the serious problem of whether the karmic life heavenly venerable could be revived or not. "Brat, do you want Grandpa Dog to accompany you to the appointment?" the large black dog asked as he continued to play around with the foundation stone of the formation that he had just obtained. This was very simple. There were only 4 pillars, but after they were buried in the ground, the area that the 4 pillars enclosed would become an independent space. No need. Ling Han shook his head. If it was only Ma Yuhai, he naturally would not take it to heart. The man and dog went their separate ways. The large black dog still had to get more divine metal. Following the beginning of the cooperation with the Wang clan, The day for the divine demon's sword to advance was getting closer and closer, and it also made the large black dog become very motivated. Because Ling Han had delayed a very long time on the way here, when he arrived at Great Fiery Mountain, the day was close to ending. He's not coming, is he? On the mountain, a great many people had deliberately come to watch the battle, but they had already waited until the moon was hanging high in the skies, and the day was about to end in just a little bit more time, yet there was still no sight of Ling Han. Then it was likely impossible for him to still come. Has he shrunk from battle? It can't be, can it? Previously, hasn't Ling Han defeated Ma Yuhai with a single move? Why would he be afraid now? It can only be said that it was Ma Yuhai who had been careless before, and Ling Han had just won in a stroke of good fortune. Now that he knows that there is no way that he will succeed 2 times, he has cowered. I didn't think he was this kind of person. Everyone was discussing spiritedly while Ma Yuhai revealed a smirk. Not only did Ma Yuhai want Ling Han to die, he also wanted to redeem his fortune. Otherwise, how is it possible that the little princess of the Wang clan changed her mind about him? Ma Yuhai was very aware that there was no way Ling Han could come. With Qin Shuang moving, Ling Han should have long since been lying dead somewhere. And as for Ma Yuhai, he had been waiting here in full public all this while, so he naturally had absolutely nothing to do with Ling Han's death. Ma Yuhai spread out a hand and said, "Everyone, it is a disappointment. Please return." Everyone stood up, their heart filled with disdain for Ling Han, to think he had actually cowered from battle. The day has not yet ended. Why is everyone in such a rush? An even voice rang out. Everyone paused. Ling Han, it was Ling Han who was finally here. Meanwhile, Ma Yuhai's expression changed drastically. Why was Ling Han here? Then what about Qin Shuang? Could it be that he had not managed to ambush Ling Han? If that was the case, that would be fine, and Ling Han clearly would not know Ma Yuhai's scheme. However, if Qin Shuang had already made his move, and Ling Han had still appeared here, the problem about that would be huge. Ma Yuhai couldn't stop trembling. What on earth had happened? Ling Han strode forwards and arrived at the summit, where he faced Ma Yuhai directly. He smiled. "When you see me appear, you must be very stunned, right?" Ma Yuhai forcefully retained his composure. "What would I be stunned by? It was I that asked you out for this battle, and it was you procrastinating and only appearing at this moment." Ling Han set his eyes on Ma Yuhai, and after a good few breaths' time, he finally said, "You asked someone to ambush me on the way here, planning to kill me. Seeing me appear alive and well, you must be feeling very perturbed, right?" "What?" Hearing Ling Han's words, a flurry of commotion exploded among the spectators in an instant. Was that really the case? It's quite logical. Otherwise, Ma Yuhai has clearly suffered a terrible defeat, and there is no clear improvement in his strength. So what is the reason he would dare to challenge Ling Han to a battle again? Hiss, that is too underhanded, isn't it? If the Martial Academy interrogated the murderer, and he confessed everything, even Lord Ma Feng would not be able to save him. At the very least, he would be expelled from the Martial Academy. That would truly be an extreme humiliation. Ma Yuhai's hands were tightly clenched into fists. His heart was also filled with unease. What if Qin Shuang had really been apprehended, and confessed the truth of how the two of them had collaborated together and schemed to kill a disciple of the Martial Academy? He would be done for. Just when he was in a daze, Ling Han suddenly sped up and arrived right in front of Ma Yuhai in a quick leap before throwing a punch at him. Clang! Ma Yuhai was instantly sent flying from this strike. While in midair, he already spluttered out a mouthful of blood, along with a considerable number of teeth. If he hadn't been so distracted, he would definitely not have been sent flying with a single slap like this. But who asked for chaos to run wild inside his heart now? Added with the fact that Ling Han's burst of speed was really too fast, Ma Yuhai had once again fallen with a single strike from Ling Han. Ma Yuhai collapsed onto the ground, blowing up a layer of dust. He was just about to scramble to his feet when he felt a weight on his face. A foot forcefully pushed him back to the ground. "I will spare your life this time, but there would definitely be no second time." Ling Han threatened menacingly. With one foot stepping on a prodigy, he swept his eyes over the surroundings, and everyone couldn't help but lower their head, not daring to even make eye contact with him. Chapter 2672. 2672. He Yufeng Exits Seclusion. Chapter 2672. 2672. He Yufeng Exits Seclusion. 2672. He Yufeng Exits Seclusion. At this time, the moon hung in the center of the sky, and this day had just ended. Everyone was shocked. Just how much time had Ling Han taken for this trip? But he had already struck Ma Yuhai to the ground. Just how wide did the power gap have to be between the two of them? But there were a large number of people who had a discerning eye, and they revealed the truth. Ling Han is indeed very strong, but it is not definite that Ma Yuhai is weaker than him either. But last time, when he had been defeated by Ling Han with a single strike, a psychological trauma must have been left behind in Ma Yuhai's heart. This time, added with how his plot was exposed, his emotions are even more disturbed. It is probable that he would not realize it even if thunder was rumbling, and adding how Ling Han is really too fast. That is what led to him being defeated with a single strike again. Facing Ling Han truly is Ma Yuhai's misfortune. Everyone shook their head, but there were also people who were curious, guessing who the person Ma Yuhai had asked for help had been. That person must be stronger than Ma Yuhai. At the ninth heaven, Monarch Star or Supreme Monarch Star. Everyone put the Monarch Stars and Supreme Monarch Stars of the ninth heaven in the Martial Academy together, yet discovered there was an overwhelmingly large number of suspects. This was because this was the world's paramount Martial Academy, which had gathered all the prodigies in the Genesis world. Furthermore, the majority of prodigies naturally would also be stuck at the ninth heaven. Thus, the number of prodigies at this level was the highest. Amu, Dushi, Kinyu, and the Imperial Void Celestial King were all placed under suspicion. Yet Ling Han couldn't be bothered. Since Ma Yuhai wanted to start a feud with him, then he'd oblige him. Ling Han had not killed Ma Yuhai this time. It was not because he didn't want to, but because he could not. After all, Ma Yuhai wanting to kill Ling Han was only Ling Han's one-sided claim. Now that Qin Shuang was dead, if Ling Han killed Ma Yuhai as well, there really would be no one alive to give testimony on his behalf. The crime of killing a disciple of the Martial Academy was too heavy. The main reason is still that my strength is inadequate, Ling Han thought. If I was a heavenly venerate, what would the simple matter of killing an eighth heaven celestial king be worth? Hence, only if I become a heavenly venerate will I truly be able to transcend and be above all rules. Ling Han returned to the Martial Academy and once again buried himself in alchemy. The amount of divine metal he had obtained was increasing, but when the number came to 40 pieces, even the Wang clan was starting to feel troubled. Divine metal was not just cabbages that could be gotten anywhere. They had some supplies of their own and also bought some more. They also traded for some in exchange for celestial pills with other noble clans. However, 40 pieces was already their limit. In the short term, they would not be able to get more than that. Thus, Ling Han had the Wang clan use other resources as replacement. He also wanted to advance the indestructible Celestial King physique to the 9th level. His work in alchemy slowed down as a result because he had used most of the medicinal ingredients that the Wang clan had gathered over several epochs. Ling Han took the Heavenly Venerate pill and ingested it. He was in great need of strength at present. Boom! When he ingested the alchemical pill, it turned into a fiery dragon that wreaked havoc in Ling Han's body. A powerful intent blazed, as if this was a high and lofty god that others could only worship. This was the pseudo-heavenly venerate divine sense that belonged to Ma Feng. Ling Han humped. A mere pseudo-heavenly venerate wants me to submit to him. If a pseudo-heavenly venerate really arrived, he would still only be able to suppress Ling Han's physical body. It was absolutely impossible to make Ling Han's will submit. That was because Ling Han had already created his own path. Merely in the aspect of quality, he was not inferior to a heavenly venerate. And now even the will of a pseudo-heavenly venerate wanted to suppress him. Was this a joke? This was Ling Han's body, and Ling Han was the king here. Under his aggressive suppression, even the will of a pseudo-heavenly venerate could only submit. Boom! A frightening power spread out throughout Ling Han's body, increasing his cultivation level. A first-tier heavenly venerate has grasped the unique power of a certain dimension, and as for a pseudo-heavenly venerate, he can already come into contact with this kind of power and extract it to temper himself. From a certain angle, he is a ninth heaven celestial king that has cultivated a body art. Ling Han glimpsed a sliver of essence of Ma Feng's cultivation path from this heavenly venerate pill. It was no wonder that this pill could possibly help a ninth heaven celestial king break through to the heavenly venerable tier. But this was useless to Ling Han. He had long since created his own path. In fact, he could even extract void particle energy to temper his body. What he needed was merely the increase to his cultivation level. 10 days later, he had completely refined the medicinal effects contained within this heavenly venerate pill. This is only an alchemical pill that a pseudo-heavenly venerate concocted, so it cannot be called a heavenly venerate pill yet. However, it has still advanced my cultivation level to the late stage of the 7th heaven, so it is quite good. If I could have another 3 or 4 such pills, I should be able to reach the peak stage. I would then be able to break through to the 8th heaven. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh. Recently, time was really crawling for Ma Yuhai. He felt uneasy every single day. He feared that his plot had been exposed and that he would completely fall from grace. He went to check on Qin Shuang, but the latter had already vanished. If Qin Shuang was dead, Ma Yuhai would be fine. As long as he denied everything, the Martial Academy could not possibly sentence him for a crime with just Ling Han's side of the story. Furthermore, Ma Yuhai was a son of a pseudo-heavenly venerate, without absolute proof, who would dare pluck out his spirit and search for the truth. But if Qin Shuang was captured, that would be terrible. 1 month, half a year, 3 years. Time passed very quickly, and no one appeared from the authorities of the Martial Academy to question Ma Yuhai about the matter of Ling Han being ambushed. So he finally relaxed his heavy heart gradually. From the look of things, Qin Shuang really had died. For years later, groundbreaking news came out. He Yufeng had exited seclusion. Who was He Yufeng? He was from an even higher grade than AMU, Dushi, and Kinyu. He was a supreme prodigy of the term before last. Furthermore, he had another prestigious identity. His father was a 4th-tier heavenly venerate by the name of Hirome, holding the title Bloody Mist. He Yufeng was the type to keep a very low profile, constantly staying in a state of seclusion. There were pitifully few people that knew of him, but that was definitely no reason to deny that he was strong. In his batch, he was one of the top elites and could practically be invincible. If that had been all, then it wouldn't have been anything notable that he had exited seclusion. It would not have caused such great commotion. More importantly, he had taken the step that all celestial kings dreamt of and become a pseudo-heavenly venerate. This was too shocking and caused an uproar in the whole Martial Academy. Those as strong as AMU, Dushi, and the other big shots had already reached the peak stage of the 9th heaven about 10 billion years ago, but 10 billion years had passed, and they were still stuck where they had started. Why was this? Was their talent inadequate? Did they not work hard enough? Did they not have enough luck? Wrong. They were equipped with all the conditions for breaking through to the heavenly venerable tier, yet were still not able to cross over to this new threshold. To become a heavenly venerate, a very extensive time of appreciation of the heaven and earth was required. who would be as lucky as Ling Han, having been able to become the overlord of a realm. He Yufeng had advanced to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier, and this was absolutely authentic. In his batch of disciples, he was also the only one who had reached the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier so far. This definitely was related to Hirong's help. He had prepared countless cultivation resources for his son, and they were all the highest grade of treasures. However, it was still undeniable that He Yufeng had the necessary ability. This was the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier, and all the people who had attained this level in history had been people at the peak of their generation. Previously, Ling Han had defeated Heavenborn and was very well known for it. But as the news of He Yufeng breaking through to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier spread out, this news naturally overshadowed Ling Han's feat completely. No matter how strong a celestial king was, compared with a heavenly venerate, they were all trash. When Ma Yuhai heard about this, he instantly leaped sky high. He was too excited. He hurriedly begged for an audience with He Yufeng. The latter's subordinate had died by Ling Han's hand, so He Yufeng should be extremely furious. Chapter 2673. 2673, Great Accomplishment of Celestial Physique. Chapter 2673. 2673, Great Accomplishment of Celestial Physique. 2673, Great Accomplishment of Celestial Physique. Ma Yuhai was still considered a notable figure, so not long after he had called to pay respects, He Yufeng granted him an audience. "Spare me your complimentary remarks. I'm tired of hearing it," He Yufeng said dully, being extremely blunt. Ma Yuhai was slightly embarrassed, but the other party was on the same level as his own father, so how would he dare to have any objection? He quickly said, "Young master something has happened. What's the matter?" He Yufeng turned to look at him. Ma Yuhai suddenly felt he was under great pressure. This was a pseudo-heavenly venerate. One gaze nearly caused him to collapse. He adjusted his frame of mind, and then said, "Young master, servant, Lord Qin Shuang, might have been killed." He Yufeng's gaze turned severe, and Ma Yuhai immediately collapsed onto his backside on the ground. This was the true power of the pseudo-heavenly venerate. He Yufeng withdrew his gaze and asked lightly, "How do you know?" Qin Shuang was just one of He Yufeng's minions, so He Yufeng naturally didn't care whether the former was alive or dead, but he was one of his men. So if really someone had killed him, as the saying went, one needs to consider who the master is before hitting a dog. He Yufeng definitely would not let the matter go. Ma Yuhai had initially made up a bunch of lies, but when He Yufeng cast him a glance, all those lies evaporated into thin air, and he quickly told the truth in full detail, not daring to add anything or spice it up in any way. After hearing this, He Yufeng couldn't help but sneer. "You have got guts, even daring to murder a disciple of the Martial Academy, huh?" Ma Yuhai was just getting up from the ground, but when he heard these words, he sat down again in fright. While he was a supreme monarch star at the peak stage of the 8th heaven, he was completely but an ant when faced with a pseudo-heavenly venerate. "Qin Shuang died because of you. You will cripple both your arms. Head on to Burst Cloud Volcano and stay there for a year," He Yufeng spoke again. Ma Yuhai didn't dare to have any objection. He nodded quickly, but his face was full of fear. Breaking both his arms was not a big deal, but Burst Cloud Volcano was a dangerous place in the Flaming Frost realm. Its horrifying flames could easily melt even divine metal. Furthermore, he had to stay on the mountain for a year. One could imagine how dangerous that could be. It would cause him extreme suffering. But would he dare to say no? A pseudo-heavenly venerate was no longer bound by any regulations. What if He Yufeng became upset and killed him with a single strike? Yes, Ma Yuhai said respectfully. "Ling Han, this person who dares to kill my servant, I will make him pay a deserving price for this." He Yufeng said again. Ma Yuhai felt overjoyed immediately. A pseudo-heavenly venerate was going to take action against Ling Han, so no matter how freakish the latter was, it would be of no use, as his life or death would completely depend on a mere thought of He Yufeng. Scram! He Yufeng said in annoyance. Ma Yuhai turned around and left at once, as nothing good would happen to him if he was to anger a pseudo-heavenly venerate. He had seen some top-tier prodigies who, taking for granted that they had some natural talent and some background, showed even the slightest disrespect in the presence of his father, and were crushed to smithereens as a result. Heavenly venerate was indeed an existence that surpassed regulations. Even a pseudo-heavenly venerate was also seated in a high and lofty height, with divine might that could not be violated. Again, the Wang clan had sent over a large quantity of resources, which included quite a number of natural treasures. Ling Han cast a sweeping glance at them and couldn't help but show a satisfied smile. In this way, his cultivation of indestructible celestial king physique should be able to reach the 9th level. For this he cultivated in seclusion, and he succeeded after 3 months. It's finally accomplished the completed state of indestructible celestial king physique. Ling Han laughed heartily. How strong would his defense be now? Even if a 9th heaven celestial king bombarded him with all his might, his body would not be hurt. Even if he was hit by a celestial tool or monarch star or supreme monarch star at the peak stage of the 9th heaven struck him, they would only cause minor injuries to his body. Unfortunately, it's still a little far from reaching the indestructible divine metal physique. Even if I was to concoct alchemical pills like before, I reckon that it will take about 10,000 years to gather enough resources. However, the celestial medicines accumulated by the Wang clan over an epoch have already been completely used to concoct alchemical pills. Even if they were to procure more from various corners, how would they be able to keep up with my speed of concocting alchemical pills? It seems that if I want to achieve the indestructible divine metal physique, it will only happen at least after 100 million years. Ling Han came out of seclusion and just sat down when he saw Zhu Xian'er coming over with an invitation card while saying, "Husband, you have got something else to work on." "What is it?" Ling Han asked casually. "He Yufeng's banquet." Zhu Xian'er raised the invitation card in her hand. "Who is He Yufeng? I don't know him." Ling Han shook his head. "Husband, he isn't just anybody, but one who has recently broken through to reach the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier," Zhu Xian'er said with a straight face. "Furthermore, He Yufeng's father is a 4th tier heavenly venerate. You have no idea, now, how many people in the Martial Academy take pride in receiving He Yufeng's invitation. However, the number of invitations issued is extremely limited, and only the real prodigies and descendants of heavenly venerates would qualify." Ling Han thought about it and suddenly realized, so it is this He Yufeng. Husband knows him? Zhu Xian'er asked curiously. Ling Han shook his head. "I don't know him, but I killed one of his men." Zhu Xian'er only rolled her eyes. He hadn't yet met with this person, but already there was enmity. This was an ability that only her husband would possess, right? "Then it's better that you do not attend this banquet," she said. Ling Han shook his head. "Since they have invited me, why should I not attend?" But Zhu Xian'er wanted to say more, but when she saw Ling Han's expression of indifference with a trace of determination, she knew that it would be futile to further dissuade him. However, this was the Martial Academy after all, so even He Yufeng wouldn't dare to do anything, right? He Yufeng's banquet was scheduled to take place 7 days later. This date was more than half a year since he had officially become a pseudo-heavenly venerate. Why did he delay to hold the banquet so late? That was because the achievement of becoming a pseudo-heavenly venerate would be a major event, and even within a transcendent dimension like the Flaming Frost Realm, it was normal to only have 1 or 2 appear in a single epoch. Given that currently prodigies from all over had gathered, and the prodigies of practically the entire Genesis world were gathered here, the frequency of pseudo-heavenly venerates popping up became much higher, so much so that more than 100 could be produced within an epoch. On average, That would be one in every 100 billion years, which was still a pitifully small number. Of course, for such a grand event, powerful figures from all sides would be invited. However, as most of the heavenly venerates were fighting against hysteria at the realm battlefield, and a pseudo-heavenly venerate was still not heavenly venerate in their eyes, and not worthy enough to be on an equal footing with them, they naturally would not humble themselves to attend. Even so, He Yufeng's abode was still filled with as many ninth heaven celestial king as clouds, and if they were not ninth heaven celestial kings, then they had to have a background at the heavenly venerate level. Otherwise, they would not be qualified to even appear here at all. Ling Han asked around, and only the large black dog had received the invitation among his group of acquaintances. He went together with the large black dog and came to the mountain where He Yufeng's abode was located. Invitation. The person standing guard at the foot of the mountain was actually a ninth heaven celestial king. After examining the invitation for one person and one dog, he smiled at them and allowed the two to go up the mountain. Brat, look, everyone else has carriages to travel around, while the two of us are traveling on foot. The large black dog couldn't help but complain to Ling Han as he watched all the carriages speed by. Grandpa Dog is, after all, a ninth heaven celestial king at the pinnacle of the celestial path, and can't be seen in such a pathetic state. Do you mean to say that we ought to go back and get a carriage to come here again? No need to go through all that trouble. You can simply get down on all fours and serve as a mount for me, the large black dog said very shamelessly. Get lost. Chapter 2674. 2674 Great Extravagance. Chapter 2674. 2674 Great Extravagance. 2674 Great Extravagance. Those that were worthy of being invited by He Yufeng were really either very wealthy or very noble. Either they had a heavenly venerate in their family line, or their own strength and natural talent were extremely astounding. Hence, they were all seated in very handsome carriages. These were only used when they were traveling to very important occasions. Firstly, as a show of respect to the host, and secondly also as a symbol of their own status. Ling Han and the large black dog saw a very extravagant person, and his steed was actually an old ox that was manifested from divine metal. It was only palm-sized and looked to be slowly trundling along, but every step covered a boundless distance, which was extremely shocking. Seeing this, the large black dog and Ling Han could barely stop themselves from rushing forwards to rob him. But thinking that this was after all the martial academy, they ultimately suppressed this impulse. Though there were also some other extravagant people, none of them could compare with this guy. Who could it be? Ling Han asked curiously. The large black dog scratched his head with a paw. Come, let's go and knock them out secretly. Ling Han rolled his eyes at him. Divine metal was extremely rare in the first place, and when divine metal was sentient and capable of taking the form of an animal, that was even rarer. The owner of this carriage had to be extremely extraordinary. If they tried to knock him out secretly, wouldn't they have the tables turned on them and be beaten up instead? If you want to, you go ahead. Ling Han shook his head resolutely. The large black dog was only saying it, and did not continue to hoot about the issue. Very soon, the man and dog arrived at the summit. There were carriages of various types and shapes parked outside now. But though the carriage that was pulled by that golden ox was extremely small, it was still extremely eye-catching because not a single carriage around dared to approach at all. They all maintained an adequate distance, so it seemed to stand out like a swan in a flock of chickens. True, it was divine metal that could take form. Even if it was only at the first heaven, its defenses would have already reached the peak stage of the celestial king tier, immortal and indestructible. Just look at Heavenborn. Just how hard was he to deal with? But now a powerful creature manifested from divine metal was actually the horsepower for someone else. How powerful would that person have to be? Just whom does this belong to? It was not just Ling Han and the large black dog that were curious. A great many people were discussing it spiritedly at the entrance to the abode. None of them had seen this carriage before, and they were all guessing at who the owner of this carriage was, or rather, which heavenly venerate's descendant this visitor was. Some people had long since entered the abode, while there were some that were beckoning over their friends and acquaintances, planning to group together before entering. "Ling Han!" someone called out. Ling Han raised his head. This was a man he had never met, but Ling Han knew who it was because he had detected this person's aura before when he had been fighting with Heavenborn. "AMU?" he asked. "That's right." AMU nodded, and did not find it strange that Ling Han recognized him. He had been in the martial academy for more than 10 billion years, and his information had long since been made known to everyone, so what was wrong with the fact that Ling Han recognized him? He Yufeng has already advanced to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. We, too, have to get a move on. Another voice rang out. Du Shi appeared, his figure sturdy and his mighty aura on full display, his demeanor domineering and sharp. Who knows, it could be junior brother Ling Han that surpasses those before him and is the first to become a pseudo-heavenly venerate. Can Yu appeared as well, his expression aloof. Those who didn't know better would think that they had garnered his displeasure. The 3 big shots appeared, instantly drawing the attention of everyone. The large black dog would naturally not be afraid of such situations. Puffing out his chest, he waved a paw in greeting at the people around. "I am a powerful figure," written all over his posture. "Greetings." Ling Han clasped his hand, offering his greetings to the 3 big shots. The 3 big shots were all very polite towards him. They were all domineering and proud and would not consider even peak stage 9th heaven celestial kings worthy of their regard. But once it was proven that a person could be their equal in future, they would also banish their airs and become considerably amicable and approachable. Ling Han had already proven that he would be qualified to become a heavenly venerate in the future. This was only a matter of time. Thus, it naturally made the 3 big shots accept him into their midst. Though the large black dog was undependable and very showy, he indeed was qualified to become a heavenly venerate, so the 3 big shots did not dare treat him lightly either. Furthermore, he was already a 9th heaven celestial king. Whichever angle they were looking at it, he was not inferior to the 3 of them in any way. Humph! A cold humph rang out, and the imperial void celestial king appeared. He was not alone, as he had his son with him. "Old geezer, what are you humping around for?" Ling Han had not even spoken. The large black dog was the first to flip out. He naturally despised the imperial void celestial king to the utmost, baring his sharp teeth and huffing out steam from his mouth. "An animal dares insult my father?" Yu Wudi immediately jumped out. In his eyes, his father was the greatest celestial king in the world, and was not matched by anyone. Now, a black dog actually dared to rebuke his father in front of him, which was something he naturally could not tolerate. Nothing but a mere 3rd heaven celestial king. "Don't embarrass yourself," Ling Han stated calmly. In the martial academy, while elites could not make a move on those weaker than themselves by 2 levels, it did not mean that the weaker party could provoke them. Otherwise, even if they were thrashed, it would be for nothing. In this world, it was ultimately power that made the rules. Now that Yu Wudi had voluntarily provoked a 9th heaven celestial king, even if he was beaten half dead, he would deserve it. Nothing would happen to the large black dog at all. Yu Wudi was clearly aware of this. He still dared jump around like this. That naturally was because his father was presently standing behind him. "Ling Han." Yu Wudi looked towards Ling Han, and he involuntarily raised a brow, filled with uncontrollable fury. Yu Wudi had walked the celestial path, and had initially planned to attain a perfect celestial seed, but forced by Ling Han, he had no choice but to break through in advance, losing all chance of attaining perfection. This naturally filled him with great resentment. However, his own battle prowess was far inferior to Ling Han's, so what chance would he have to avenge this misdeed? Now that his enemy had appeared in front of him, his eyes turned bloodshot with fury. Yet Ling Han did not even glance at him. This kind of guy was already not worthy of garnering his regard. If this were not the Martial Academy, he would have directly killed him with a single strike. Ling Han set his eyes on the Imperial Void Celestial King and said, "If you do not take care of your son's smelly mouth, I will be smashing it." The Imperial Void Celestial King couldn't help but sneer. "Ling Han, you really are arrogant. Do you think that you are qualified to stand equal to me just because you have advanced to the seventh heaven now? Old geezer, what are you so fierce for? Don't you know that this brat is under Grandpa Dog's protection?" The large black dog jumped out, pointing a paw at the Imperial Void Celestial King, his actions very provocative. The Imperial Void Celestial King was very disdainful. "A defeated opponent, I alone can suppress the two of you." The large black dog roared loudly and moved aggressively. The Imperial Void Celestial King was taken aback. In his eyes, the large black dog was the type to have no backbone. How did he dare to make a move on him voluntarily? While that was what he was thinking, he naturally would not just be standing there and allowing the large black dog to attack him. His right hand balled into a fist, and he threw a punch at the large black dog, endless regulations condensing in his fist. This punch had astonishing might. Clang! The two of them exchanged a punch, and both of them instantly trembled, taking a few steps backwards. Boom! A frightening shock wave surged out, and everyone in the surroundings was implicated as they were thrown backwards as if they were made of straw. Thankfully, those that could come today either had outstanding strength themselves or had a heavenly venerable tier background. So how could they possibly not possess any treasures that they could protect themselves with? In this instant, various kinds of lights burst madly as terrifying auras that surpassed great Tao spread out. Ling Han, Du Shi, and the company naturally would not be concerned. If the Imperial Void Celestial King or the large black dog attacked them, they definitely would have to dodge or make a move to parry, but if it was just a mere shock wave, it was no big deal. The Imperial Void Celestial King looked surprised because the large black dog was actually not the slightest bit inferior to him in this exchange. Chapter 2675. 2675 He Yufeng appears. Chapter 2675. 2675 He Yufeng appears. 2675 He Yufeng appears. Old geezer, never thought that Grandpa Dog would be so powerful, right? The large black dog was proud of himself, swaying his behind, his iron underwear reflecting light. He couldn't look any more despicable if he tried. The Imperial Void Celestial King was indeed angered, and even Ling Han and the others felt their eyes hurt as they were blinded by this horrible sight. "Strange," the Imperial Void Celestial King mumbled. When one had reached a height like they had, it was possible that their strength could only increase by the slightest sliver in a whole epoch, but just how long had passed? The large black dog was actually able to stand as his equal now. This improvement was too shockingly large. It was completely unrealistic. This was natural. The large black dog was strong not because his cultivation level had progressed, or because he had suddenly comprehended something, but rather because Ling Han had taught the 9 transformations divine scroll to him. By now, the large black dog had already comprehended and fused 4 parts of the 9 transformations divine scroll. This naturally boosted his battle prowess by a large extent, so he was now capable of matching the Imperial Void Celestial King. Furthermore, the might of a complete heavenly venerate technique was indeed greater, but it would also expend more power, and even a 9th heaven Celestial King could not possibly channel it constantly. However, a heavenly venerate technique that had been split was different. With the large black dog's cultivation level, he was completely capable of channeling it continuously. Again, the large black dog did not fall into a disadvantage in this exchange, so he was naturally unwilling to give up. With old feuds and new grudges all added together, how could he be willing to stop here? The Imperial Void Celestial King humphed coldly. He naturally would not be afraid, either. The 2 great Celestial Kings fought furiously, causing extensive damage and destruction. Ling Han looked towards Yewudi, but did not speak. He looked like a hungry wolf that had set his eye on a little rabbit. Yewudi felt a chill at the look in his eyes. Involuntarily, he took several steps back. He only came to his senses when he retreated to the point that he collided with a broken pillar. His face instantly flushed red. "That's enough, isn't it? Today is the great day of our young master. Please pay some respect to my master." A voice rang out, and a powerful aura spread out. The Imperial Void Celestial King and the large black dog exchanged another 3 blows, and only then did they stop. The person who had spoken to play mediator was a 9th Heaven Celestial King, but he was only a monarch tier, and neither the Imperial Void Celestial King nor the large black dog took him to heart. However, he was speaking on behalf of a pseudo-heavenly venerate, so they still had to give his master some face. "Old geezer, I'll beat you up every time I see you," the large black dog declared, pointing at the Imperial Void Celestial King. The Imperial Void Celestial King almost exploded with fury. "You didn't even fucking get the upper hand, so why are you speaking so self-righteously?" Usually he would not be angered so easily, but the appearance of the large black dog was really too capable of drawing fury. His whole being was emanating a despicable feeling. Even if one did not want to get angry, it could not be done. Du Shi sighed slowly and said, "If anyone tells me again that Junior Brother and Brother Black Dog come from a super low-level dimension, I will definitely get angry at them." AMU couldn't help but laugh. True. What low-level dimension could produce Ling Han, Heavenborn, the Imperial Void Celestial King, the large black dog, Hua Furong, Jiwuming, and other such supreme prodigies all of a sudden? All of them could possibly reach the Heavenly Venerable tier. Was this super low-level dimension going to explode? Humph. The Imperial Void Celestial King beckoned his son to enter into the abode. Before he entered, he glared harshly at Ling Han and the large black dog, especially Ling Han. He had not been able to get rid of him at the Celestial Realm, and in the end, this little brat had gained enough time and room to mature. Now he was close to standing on equal level with him. Too bad, it was too late for regrets. Ling Han, 8 Mu, and the others entered into the abode. Ling Han knew that He Yufeng definitely had not invited him here for anything good, but he couldn't avoid him forever. Ultimately, he would have to face him eventually. It was useless to continue avoiding him. Thus he had come. Banquets were more or less the same, an occasion for wining and dining and making some friends. Representatives had also come from the Wang clan, and it was not just the little princess of the Wang clan. There were also 2 important characters, Wang Qianyang and Wang Yangming, which could be considered as having given He Yufeng enough face. By now, Wang Yangming's attitude towards Ling Han was even more passionate than Wang Qianyang's. The moment he saw Ling Han, he walked over, dragging Wang Jiwa with him, and said, "Young friend Ling, long time no see." "How long could it be?" Ling Han chuckled and replied, "Greetings, seniors." As for Wang Jiwa, he naturally ignored her entirely. Wang Jiwa humphed. This man actually dared to reject her, so she was both angered and dissatisfied. AMU and the other big shots had their own circles, so it was naturally impossible that they would constantly stay with Ling Han. Seeing the people from the Wang clan approach, they smiled, excused themselves, and walked elsewhere. Ling Han chatted idly with Wang Qianyang and Wang Yangming, and it was inevitable that He Yufeng would come up in conversation. "This boy is truly freakish. It has only been 300 billion years, and he has already advanced to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. This kind of accomplishment can be ranked in the top 3 in the last epoch." Wang Qianyang was very rueful. "I have lived for 3 epochs, yet still have not glimpsed the heavenly venerable tier. In comparison, this is truly something to make one feel rueful." Though the peak stage of the 9th Heaven Celestial King tier and pseudo-heavenly venerable tier were only separated by a single line, if one could not sense that unique power of heaven and earth, then no matter how outstanding your talent was, you would still be stuck at the Celestial King tier even after 100 epochs had passed. Wang Yongming was unconvinced and said, "And he is not that far off either. He has set foot in the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier using only 401 billion years." Wang Qianyang also showed a sliver of pride. The reason why He Yufeng had managed to advance to the heavenly venerable tier sooner was also because his old man was a 4th tier heavenly venerate and had gotten enough natural treasures for him. Otherwise, the time of his breakthrough to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier would not be any less than that of the supreme prodigy of their own clan. Ling Han merely smiled in response. He could not bring himself to say that in actual fact he was already able to sense void particle energy and could extract it to temper himself. From a certain point of view, he was already a pseudo-heavenly venerate, but one that was weakened countless times over. He could just barely possess battle prowess at the level of the peak stage of the 9th heaven. He would not boast about that. It was probable there was no one that would believe him anyways. A 7th heaven pseudo-heavenly venerate? More and more people arrived. Ling Han kept looking for the owner of that carriage, pulled by the golden ox formed of divine metal. But no matter whom he asked, they would all shake their heads. They did not know that such an incredibly awesome character had also arrived at the banquet. This person was keeping such a low profile. When the moon had reached the center of the sky, someone suddenly shouted loudly, "The young master arrives!" Instantly, there was a complete silence as everyone turned to look at the entrance of the inner courtyard. The figure of a young man very soon appeared. He was of slender, tall build with a handsome face. His aura was subtle, and he seemed like an ordinary man, but one only had to take a better look and one would discover how different he was. But to exactly point out what the difference was, it was not something that could be expressed in words. He Yufeng, a newly broken through pseudo-heavenly venerate. "Kaki!" The large black dog scoffed. Ling Han also nodded, but also felt a bit of surprise because it had only been half a year since He Yufeng broke through, yet he had already taken control of his aura. Clearly, he had stabilized his cultivation level. This aspect proved just how freakish he was. He Yufeng was dashing and elegant, raising his cup to propose a toast. His words were also very polite, not putting on the airs of a pseudo-heavenly venerate at all. So everyone gradually let go of their reservations and wariness, and liveliness returned once more to the area. "Which of you are Ling Han?" He Yufeng suddenly asked. Instantly, dead silence fell once more, and everyone turned to look at Ling Han. Ling Han only acted as if he had not heard anything, and slowly sipped from his cup of wine. He Yufeng looked towards him and said, "It was you who killed that servant of mine." When these words fell, a wave of commotion arose among the crowd. When had this happened? Ling Han was too brave, wasn't he? He dared to make a move even on one of He Yufeng's men. "That's right. Based on the results, it was indeed I who killed him." Ling Han nodded very frankly. Chapter 2676. 2676 Tyrant. Chapter 2676. 2676 Tyrant. 2676 Tyrant. If Qin Shuang was a disciple of the Martial Academy, Ling Han would definitely deny it completely. Killing one of his fellow disciples was a heavy crime. But if he was not a disciple of the Martial Academy, then there was no need to be reserved. Counter soldiers with arms and water with an earthware. Just do whatever you like. You are really bold to dare to touch even one of my men, He Yufeng said, but the expression on his face was still nonchalant, as if he was not angered at all. Indeed, Qin Shuang was only one of his subordinates, not a member of his family. Moreover, he had already cultivated to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier, so how could he possibly display all his emotions easily? "I am in quite a good mood now, so my punishment for you is for you to be my servant for an epoch. Do you yield?" He Yufeng continued. When everyone heard this, They were all gritting their teeth internally. Ling Han's freakish nature was clear for all to say. To say nothing of an epoch, it was possible he would only need several tens of billions of years, and he would be able to step out of the celestial king tier and become a pseudo-heavenly venerate if he were really to bow down to He Yufeng and become the latter's servant. Then even if Ling Han became a heavenly venerate in the future, it would also leave behind a humiliation that would never be erased. Throughout history, there had never been a time when a heavenly venerate had become the servant of another. What heavenly venerate was not extremely noble and proud? He Yufeng was really too ruthless, wasn't he? Ling Han smiled faintly. I am a disciple of the Martial Academy. Acting this way, don't you think that is going too far? Too far. He Yufeng laughed loudly. You are too naive. Rules can only bound mortals, and I have already leapt out of the mortal realm. The regulations of heaven and earth cannot bind me, and neither can the rules of the mortal world. Do you think that the Martial Academy would punish me severely if I killed you here today? At most, it would only be a few harmless words of reprimand. These words were spoken extremely arrogantly. This was practically ignoring the Martial Academy completely, but everyone had no choice but to admit that He Yufeng's words were indeed logical. Heavenly venerates, even if it was just a pseudo-heavenly venerate, had already leapt out of the chess game, and they could write their own rules to decide how the game should be played. Would the Martial Academy impose a heavy punishment on a pseudo-heavenly venerate for the sake of a celestial king disciple? Absolutely not. Otherwise, the celestial king graveyard wouldn't have existed in the first place. Wouldn't it have been fine to just kill those celestial kings that had committed severe crimes? What would have been the point of sending them to prison? Those celestial kings that had powerful backgrounds were like that, so what more when it was a heavenly venerate himself? He Yufeng stood with his arms crossed behind his back, his expression appearing very relaxed. As he saw it, he was only going through the motions. If Ling Han did not yield, he would just move to get rid of him. As simple as that. He would be just that overbearing, but so what? He was a heavenly venerate, and that was why he could be so willful. Even if you were furious, you were outraged, you were dissatisfied, so what? Everyone's eyes were focused on Ling Han. People wanted to know how he would react. Would he bear with this and get this over with first, or choose to die in battle instead? No matter what, Ling Han's fate would definitely be terrible. Ling Han broke into a smile. Really, I don't believe it. The smile on He Yufeng's face instantly froze. He humphed. The word of a heavenly venerate is even heavier than the regulations of heaven and earth. You dare to refuse. This is an insult to me. How could a heavenly venerate tolerate being insulted? He stretched out a hand, and a terrifying pressure was instantly exerted. Everyone felt suffocated, and their blood vessels popped out, looking like they were close to bursting. Lord He, Wang Qianyang suddenly spoke up. I would like to ask Lord He for some face, to spare this boy just this once. Wang Qianyang, everyone thought simultaneously. The Wang clan was a veteran noble clan, and the grand elder of the Wang clan was a third-tier heavenly venerate, an existence that the masses could only look up at in admiration. With Wang Qianyang speaking up on Ling Han's behalf like this, they were sure that He Yufeng would definitely give him some face, right? He Yufeng did not say anything, and merely stared at Wang Qianyang. The atmosphere became colder and colder. Everyone couldn't help but shiver. Only when it reached the point that some of them were close to screaming in spite of themselves did He Yufeng finally spoke. If it was that third-tier heavenly venerate of the Wang clan that spoke, I would take a step back. If it was Brother Andy speaking, I would give him some face. However, you are but a mere ninth heaven celestial king. What right do you have to ask me to give you face? Gasp! Everyone inhaled sharply. None of them had expected that He Yufeng would actually not give Wang Qianyang any face at all. It should be known that Wang Qianyang was the clan leader of the Wang clan. Furthermore, it was also possible that he could break through to the heavenly venerable tier. But when everyone thought about it again, they nodded. In terms of background, He Yufeng's old man was a 4th tier heavenly venerate, a level higher than even the Grand Elder of the Wang clan. And in terms of their individual status, He Yufeng was a pseudo-heavenly venerate, high and noble. Then, He Yufeng really had no need to give face to Wang Qianyang. No one could find any wrong in that. Meanwhile, Wang Qianyang was so furious that he was shaking. He was the clan leader of the Wang clan. From a certain aspect, he represented a 3rd tier heavenly venerate. Even a true heavenly venerate would be very polite to him. Yet now someone was treating him with utter and complete disdain. How could he not feel angry? Moreover, I have just broken through, yet you dare to make me fail. What is the meaning of this? He Yufeng asked coldly. Wang Qianyang's beard moved even though there was no wind. He pointed at He Yufeng. Fine, I truly would like to see. What do you dare do to me? He stood in front of Ling Han. Wang Yangming hesitated slightly, but he, too, took a step and stood beside Wang Qianyang. The Wang clan had shown where they stood. They were going to stand on Ling Han's side, merely biting off more than you can chew. He Yufeng moved, stretching out his right hand, which turned into a colossal hand that grabbed out at Wang Qianyang and Wang Yangming. There were no seals flickering. It was just a giant hand of green, as if it was carved from green stone, but the moment his hand extended, might rolled out strongly. Even a 9th heaven, celestial king, would feel fear. A pseudo-heavenly venerate was someone that could only be blocked by at least 10 peak stage 9th heaven celestial kings. Both Wang Qianyang and Wang Yangming went all out, but how could just the 2 of them block a pseudo-heavenly venerate? Within just a few moves, they were both wounded and collapsed to sit on the ground, throwing up blood continuously. He Yufeng withdrew his hand and declared proudly, For the sake of the rising clouds, heavenly venerate, I will only issue a minor punishment and spare your lives. Both Wang Qianyang and Wang Yangming were coughing up blood continuously and could not speak at all. Ling Han's hands balled into fists, fury burning in his heart. He knew that He Yufeng would definitely be a tyrant, but for him to be tyrannical to this extent was something he had not expected. They were in the martial academy, but he was actually still so unrestrained. Is there anyone that objects to my course of action? He Yufeng asked calmly, sweeping a look at the surroundings. No one dared to make eye contact, all of them lowering their gazes. Meanwhile, the Imperial Void Celestial King and Yu Wudi were overjoyed. Ling Han was done for this time. He was definitely finished. Another person who was delighted was Zhuo Kai. He was smiling so wide that the corners of his lips were almost reaching his ears. He wanted nothing more than to clap loudly in delight. Grandpa Dog disagrees. The large black dog stepped out. Brat, you have just cultivated a few more years. If little Han were given several 100 million years' time, see if he won't thrash you and make you call him Grandpa. He Yufeng's expression instantly darkened. This damn dog's tongue was truly poisonous. Not only had he insulted him in a single breath, he had also dragged his father into the matter. He humphed. To dare act insolent in front of me, how dare you? He moved once more, grabbing out at the large black dog. With his power, if he was grabbed solidly, the large black dog would definitely be crushed into pieces. If you can, come and chase Grandpa Dog. The large black dog was previously speaking arrogantly, but when it really came down to a fight, he would be running faster than anyone. Xiao! In an instant, he raced out of the abode. Chapter 2677. 2677 Give Some Face. Chapter 2677. 2677 Give Some Face. 2677 Give Some Face. The large black dog's goal was very simple, which was to lead He Yufeng away in order to create a chance for Ling Han to escape. Unfortunately, He Yufeng was not fooled. His palm strike missed its target. and he quite casually withdrew his hand, his gaze still fixated on Ling Han. When the large black dog saw this, he immediately ran back and shouted at the door, "Fish-eyed brat, why don't you come after Grandpa Dog? You dare not? Come, come. Grandpa Dog will not bully you. How about I let you have the advantage, and I'll just fight with one front paw and one hind paw." As he folded one front paw and one hind paw, the large black dog stood on one leg. This was indeed very mocking, and the corners of He Yufeng's mouth twitched involuntarily. He couldn't help but deliver a palm strike at the large black dog. Boom! The outpouring of power was extremely terrifying. Grandpa Dog's leaving again. Schwa! The large black dog took to his heels at an incomparably fast speed. Prior to his complete cultivation of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, speed was his forte, and this was his real, life-saving skill. He Yufeng missed again, but before he could speak, the large black dog appeared again. He stuck out his head at the door. "Did you miss Grandpa Dog? Grandpa Dog is back." He Yufeng's eyes flashed with fury. His insistence on dealing with Ling Han wasn't only due to the death of his subordinate, but also because he wanted to impose his might, or as the saying went, to make drastic changes to an organization upon taking charge. Having just ascended to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier, he naturally had to impose his might and announce his rise to all. The Wang clan wanted to stop him, and he pushed them down without hesitation. When a large black dog wanted to stop him, he immediately delivered a fatal strike. The problem was, it didn't go very smoothly. How could this damn dog move so fast? He Yufeng decided to ignore him, and despite Ling Han's cultivation level being the lowest, he had already given him an ultimatum that either Ling Han would kneel and pledge his allegiance as a servant, or he would be killed. The dignified pseudo-heavenly venerate had already spoken, so how could he not keep to his own word? He stared at Ling Han, killing, intent flashing in his eyes. "Damn fish-eye, what's so impressive about bullying a brat at the seventh heaven? If you've got guts, how about having 300 rounds battling with Grandpa Dog?" The large black dog shouted at once. This time, He Yufeng completely ignored him. He took action and launched a palm strike at Ling Han. The pseudo-heavenly venerate made his move, and even if Ling Han's speed was higher than the ordinary ninth heaven celestial kings, how would he be able to dodge? Boom! This palm strike appeared in front of Ling Han as soon as it was unleashed. The huge, green-colored hand was like a grindstone that could obliterate all celestial kings. Ling Han humphed loudly and channeled the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. He had already accomplished the complete cultivation of the indestructible celestial king physique, which gave him the confidence to take this blow. Pum! As the palm pressed downwards, it immediately caused the entire abode to shake profusely. A battle between celestial kings could destroy this abode. What more when it was a pseudo-heavenly venerate that had made the move? Fortunately, He Yufeng of course would not destroy his own abode. Afterwards, his left hand immediately followed with a grab, annihilating the resulting shock wave in time, and only made the abode shake. The dust dissipated, and a silhouette radiating with glittering golden light was seen in front of Ling Han. As the golden light dimmed until it disappeared, the figure of the large black dog was revealed. He had rushed out in time just now and blocked He Yufeng's blow. How freakish! A ninth heaven celestial king could actually block a blow from a pseudo-heavenly venerate. It hurts Grandpa Dog so much. While everyone was still sighing in amazement, the large black dog flopped onto the ground, screaming in pain, which instantly caused everyone's newly revised impression of him to once again plunge to the lowest level of despicable. This was truly a despicable dog. Its ways couldn't be changed. The large black dog wasn't as miserable as he acted. He had also cultivated the indestructible celestial king physique, and had initiated the channeling of the indestructible Heaven Scroll. With his cultivation level as a ninth heaven celestial king, the power unleashed definitely surpassed that of Ling Han. At most, this blow would only shake up his internal organs for a bit. He Yufeng's expression turned ugly. He just wanted to kill a seventh heaven celestial king. How difficult could it be? He had just broken through to become a pseudo-heavenly venerate, and this was precisely a time marked with great enthusiasm. Why did it turn out that so many people wanted to go against him? Ling Han had to die. He had to die. He Yufeng humphed. The large black dog could stop him once, but would he be able to stop him 100 or 1,000 times? If there was a person that a pseudo-heavenly venerate wanted to kill, could a ninth heaven celestial king stop him from doing so? I also want to ask brother, he to give me some face. How about we drop the matter from here onwards? A pure and sweet voice suddenly sounded, and immediately melted the coldness like the spring breeze in March and made people feel comfortable. Yet He Yufeng was actually getting even more displeased. He merely wanted to kill a seventh heaven celestial king. Why was it that there would always be people who objected to it? He turned towards the person who had spoken. His gaze swept over, and his eyes suddenly narrowed slightly. She was a young girl with an elegant appearance. Although she couldn't be described as having goddess-like beauty, the sight of her made people feel comfortable, like a stalk of light-colored chrysanthemum, deserving of meticulous appreciation. However, that wasn't the main point. The main point was that he hadn't discovered the existence of this woman before this. He was a dignified pseudo-heavenly venerate with such powerful divine sense. How could he have missed out one person? Miss, what is your name? He Yufeng asked in a deep voice. Although this young girl didn't reveal any aura, he couldn't help but feel apprehensive. The woman smiled gently. Lin Piaoxue. Lin Piaoxue. Everyone exchanged looks and shook their head as they had never heard of the name. The large black dog leaned over and murmured softly, "Little Han, we don't have to run. This little girl seems to be very powerful." Ling Han nodded. Although the woman's aura wasn't prominent, she gave him a feeling of extreme danger. He Yufeng frowned slightly. This woman only revealed her name, but did not mention anything regarding her background or cultivation level, which was equivalent to not saying anything. He hesitated before asking, "Why does Miss Lin want to protect this person?" "Oh, my father thinks quite highly of this person, so he asked me to make this trip to bring him home with me and see how we can assist to increase his cultivation level by a little bit," Lin Piaoxue said in a very casual manner. However, when everyone heard this, they were all shocked. Ling Han was already at the seventh heaven, so how could it be an easy thing to increase his cultivation level by a little bit? However, Lin Piaoxue actually said it as if it was a matter as simple as eating a bowl of rice. "Fuck, what does your family do? And who might your father be?" She must be bluffing. He Yufeng didn't believe it either. He said lightly, "And who is your father?" Lin Piaoxue smiled gently. "Now it is me who asks brother he to give me some face. It has nothing to do with my father." "That would have to depend on whether you have the strength." He Yufeng finally decided to take action. After having cultivated to become a pseudo-heavenly venerate, if he couldn't do the first thing he said, then it would really make him lose face too much. Boom! He still stretched out one hand, which transformed into a green-colored grindstone. Lin Piaoxue wasn't the large black dog. Naturally, she would not dodge, but extended a delicate finger and pointed it towards the sky. A black light flashed and the grindstone in the sky instantly shattered to pieces. Boom! With this shot, her aura could no longer be hidden and surged up violently like a tsunami. Pseudo-heavenly venerate. My goodness, another pseudo-heavenly venerate. How come such a character has never been seen in the martial academy? Furthermore, she isn't a pseudo-heavenly venerate who has just broken through, but also possesses a domineering aura of resolution and bloodlust. She must either have broken through in the realm battlefield or have fought bloody battles there for countless years. Everyone was shocked. This was also a pseudo-heavenly venerate, and she was most likely stronger than He Yufeng. Lin Piaoshue's face was plastered with a soft smile, and her manner was graceful. "Brother He, can you give me some face?" Chapter 2678. 2678 The Wrath of an Ordinary Man. Chapter 2678. 2678 The Wrath of an Ordinary Man. 2678 The Wrath of an Ordinary Man. This was the second time that Lin Piaoshue had said these words. The first time He Yufeng was just curious and a little apprehensive, but the second time this sentence was uttered, he actually felt a chill rise within him. Although it was only one move, he had already noticed the disparity between himself and Lin Piaoshue. He wasn't strong enough. This was because he had relied on the accumulation of resources and extremely long periods of cultivation in seclusion to break through to become a pseudo-heavenly venerate. Of course, he also possessed natural talent. Otherwise, no matter the amount of resources used or the length of time spent in painstaking cultivation, it would also be in vain. However, his opponent had broken through in bloody battles, with martial intent that couldn't be faked and was full of resolve and bloodlust. When compared, He Yufeng was like a flower seedling in a greenhouse, while the other party was like a towering tree that had weathered the storms. If the two of them were to battle, he would lose disastrously. He was just lacking in experience. If he could exchange blows with a pseudo-heavenly venerate more often, then his battle prowess would definitely increase rapidly, and he would not lose to the other party. However, he wasn't her match right now. Therefore, he had to respectfully give her face. Just like before, He Yufeng could ignore the rules of the martial academy and deal with whomever he wanted, and even publicly announce he would kill Ling Han. Why was he allowed to be so insolent? Strength. The same was true. Now his strength wasn't as great as Lin Piaoshue's, so he had to admit defeat. Otherwise, even if Lin Piaoshue decided to strike and beat the crap out of him, so what? A pseudo-heavenly venerate was just a pseudo-heavenly venerate. When facing an existence of the same level, he had to be apprehensive and even bow to her superior strength. For Miss Lin's sake, I will spare the brat this once. He glanced at Ling Han, cold light flickering in his eyes. This person had caused him to completely lose face. Naturally, this made him furious. He might not be able to kill him this time, but the next time, Lin Piaoshue couldn't possibly stay by Ling Han's side all the time, right? Tomorrow he would kill this person. Get lost. He Yufeng waved Ling Han away in dismissal. What somebody didn't see couldn't hurt them. Everyone was feeling rueful. Ling Han was indeed born under a lucky star. First, the Wang clan personally stepped forward to take care of him. Then he was protected by an elite like the large black dog, and finally a mysterious pseudo-heavenly venerate was helping him out. One might well ask, was there any other seventh heaven celestial king who had such prestige? There wasn't a single person who felt that Ling Han should feel aggrieved. What was there to be aggrieved about? A pseudo-heavenly venerate was forced to back down. Surely your stature was soaring sky-high. After this incident, Ling Han's fame would definitely rise to the next level, although it was on account of others. Ling Han moved, but to everyone's surprise, he didn't turn around. On the contrary, he strode towards He Yufeng until the two were only 3 meters apart, then stopped and said, "Although I am merely at the 7th heaven, and clearly not a pseudo-heavenly venerate's match, but the wrath of an ordinary man can still cause blood to splash 3 feet. He said these words in a very low voice, letting out the anger that he had been suppressing for most of the day, and everyone couldn't help but be emotionally moved. "But what do you plan on doing?" "Challenging a pseudo-heavenly venerate." Ling Han paused for a while, and then said, "I would like to spar with heavenly venerate he for 10 moves." As soon as these words were uttered, everyone was dumbfounded, and many people actually wondered if there was something wrong with their ears to have heard such preposterous words. A 7th heaven celestial king actually challenged a pseudo-heavenly venerate. Gasp! However, big shots such as Du Shi and AMU showed admiration. Precisely as Ling Han had said when an ordinary man was angered, he could cause blood to splash 3 feet. If Ling Han had just swallowed his anger, it would have been a wise move, but that would make them classify him as inferior. Although he would not be despised, he would not be regarded as one of them, either. To spar for 10 moves, his voice rang out resoundingly. I was at the 7th heaven, and naturally would not be a match for a pseudo-heavenly venerate, but I did have my pride and would definitely not allow you to bully and humiliate me. Lin Piaoshui's eyes lit up as well. Although she had come out to help Ling Han, it was only because of her father's orders. She didn't have any favorable impression of Ling Han, but of course, neither did she bear any ill will against him. He was just someone she saw on the streets. There wasn't any feeling whatsoever. But at this moment, she somewhat understood why someone as powerful as her father would have such high regard for Ling Han. Just this courage of his was definitely worth her trip. She was keenly interested and wanted to know whether Ling Han was simply an ordinary man being angered and blinded by his anger, which led him to overestimate his own abilities and issue a challenge, or he really had a trump card up his sleeve and was confident he could withstand 10 moves against a Yufeng. The most furious of all, of course, was He Yufeng. The dignified pseudo-heavenly venerate was actually challenged by a 7th heaven celestial king. Of course, he could have killed Ling Han with a single palm strike, but for a celestial king to dare to challenge a pseudo-heavenly venerate, it was tantamount to the latter's dignity being ruthlessly stabbed and scraped in one blow. He Yufeng took a deep breath and said, "What an ignorant brat! Well, I will allow you to make 9 moves first, and when you get to the 10th move, I will make you understand what is reverence." He made up his mind to kill Ling Han on the spot at the 10th move and not give Lin Piaoxue a chance to extend a helping hand. It couldn't be helped. Who asked this brat to challenge a pseudo-heavenly venerate? The prestige of heavenly venerate couldn't be violated. Ling Han smiled lightly. He didn't bring out the divine demon sword. He just shook his hands and squeezed them into fists. The 9 transformations divine scroll was circulating, and his battle prowess was increasing wildly. Currently, Ling Han's conventional battle prowess has reached the peak of the 9th heaven, and then being magnified by the 9 transformations divine scroll, his battle prowess could at least temporarily be comparable to that of a supreme monarch star at the peak of the 9th heaven, or even stronger. Kill! Ling Han charged forward, his fist striking furiously. Even if he was only a 7th heaven celestial king, did it mean that he had no temper and could be humiliated by others? As for the 2 elites of the Wang clan, they were injured by He Yufeng on Ling Han's account, and the large black dog was almost seriously wounded. Why should innocent people be implicated? Just because He Yufeng was strong. Pum! 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 Ling Han struck furiously, using both fists with enormous strength. Everyone was stunned. Was Ling Han really a 7th heaven celestial king? How come it felt like he was stronger than a 9th heaven celestial king? However, what was even more terrifying was He Yufeng. He crossed his hands behind his back, and no matter how Ling Han struck him furiously, he was like a boulder that wouldn't budge, making people feel despair at the situation. This was a pseudo-heavenly venerate who had broken away from the celestial king tier and regulations, and ascended to a kind of height that a celestial king could only look up to. Is your strength only this much? He Yufeng sneered. Lin Piaoxue secretly shook her head. Ling Han's current battle prowess was indeed extraordinary. If he was at the cultivation level of 9th heaven celestial king, then after channeling this secret technique, it would really be possible to hurt a pseudo-heavenly venerate. However, Ling Han was merely at the level of 7th heaven after all. Such an attack would make any 9th heaven celestial king apprehensive, and even not dare face this kind of attack head-on, but it was still a long way off from dealing with a pseudo-heavenly venerate. The 7th move, 8th move, and 9th move. He Yufeng smiled lightly and countered Ling Han with a strike of his palm. "And you take a blow from me as well." Boom! When the strike was unleashed, heaven and earth almost ruptured. Lin Piaoxiue could not find a reason to lend a hand, as it was Ling Han who said to spar for 10 moves. If he was killed by He Yufeng, that would be what he had brought upon himself. How could a heavenly venerate be provoked? Ling Han didn't think of retreating. He gave a loud roar, his eyes flashed fiercely. His face was full of determination, and his right fist opened and spread out to form a palm strike, and 9-colored divine lightning flashed, striking fiercely towards He Yufeng. Pa, pa, pa. As he unleashed this palm strike, his right arm began to rupture. All the blood vessels exploded at the same time, and skin and flesh flew, leaving only the bare bones as Ling Han charged forwards relentlessly. The wrath of an ordinary man. Chapter 2679. 2679. A pseudo-heavenly venerate bleeds. Chapter 2679. 2679. A pseudo-heavenly venerate bleeds. 2679. A pseudo-heavenly venerate bleeds. Ling Han only sent out a shot of the 5 elements lightning technique, but why did his whole arm explode? That was very simple. It was because not only was he channeling the 5 elements lightning technique, he was also using the divine lightning to boost its power. A heavenly venerate technique could not possibly be channeled constantly. A celestial king could not bear so much power. Before he used it to hurt others, he would kill himself first. If it had been a few days ago, Ling Han truly would not have dared to be so reckless, but his indestructible celestial king physique had already reached great accomplishment level. His physique was only slightly inferior to divine metal, yet this gave him the confidence and courage to make this attempt. Though he was just an ordinary man, his fury was still capable of making a heavenly venerate bleed. Die! Ling Han charged over, boldly and grandly forging onwards without reservations. He Yufeng finally showed a hint of seriousness in his expression. He was proud, but he would definitely not be blindly self-conceited. When this blow from Ling Han was delivered, his first reaction was to avoid a head-on confrontation with it. But who was he? He was a dignified, pseudo-heavenly venerate, and to actually have to dodge the attack of a 7th heaven. How could he bear it? Furthermore, if He Yufeng avoided this strike, Ling Han would really have finished all 10 moves. A 7th heaven had made an empty threat in front of a pseudo-heavenly venerate, claiming he could withstand 10 moves. But in the end, he truly turned this into reality. Then how would He Yufeng, the pseudo-heavenly venerate, be able to face others in future? He Yufeng could not dodge. He had to take it head-on and kill Ling Han with his overwhelming strength. He Yufeng humphed coldly. Green ribbons of light entwined around his hands, exuding a pressure that far surpassed the celestial king tier. He pressed his hands down on Ling Han. This clash was earth-shattering. AMU, Dushi, and Can all paled in shock. They knew themselves well. If it was they that were receiving this strike from either Ling Han or He Yufeng, they would only be severely injured. The only solution would be to dodge the blow. Taking this attack head-on would only be making things difficult for themselves. But He Yufeng being so strong was logical. What was Ling Han's reason for being so awesome, then? It was inconceivable, it was unimaginable, it was unacceptable. Even Lin Piaoxiue showed a hint of surprise, nodding internally. Ling Han being able to send out such a blow was really worthy of the grand words that he had previously said. The fury of even an ordinary man could spill blood in all directions. Boom! The attacks sent out by the 2 great elites finally crashed into each other, forming a great explosion that surpassed regulations. Lin Piaoxiue hurriedly moved, suppressing the multiple resulting shock waves. Otherwise, if these shock waves from the clash were allowed to wreak havoc and cause destruction, who knew how many people would be implicated? The majority of them would definitely be killed. It was a terrifying wave of power. Even if Lin Piaoxiue had dispelled the major part of the impact, there were still some small ripples that seeped out, causing quite a few people to cough up blood and breaking their bones. They were all astounded. If even a tiny shock wave had been so powerful, then just what kind of terrifying impact had the two people at the center of the battle sustained? When the dust settled, Ling Han was still standing where he had been, but not only had his entire right arm exploded, leaving behind only white bone, even his whole upper body had lost all flesh and blood, leaving behind only his skeleton. However, he was still standing steadily, his eyes exuding a fighting spirit that was soaring sky-high, as if he was a supreme divine sword that had just been unsheathed. Looking back at He Yufeng, he was still holding the position of laying down his right hand. His situation was much, much better than Ling Han's. His robes were all neat and tidy, and he practically had not sustained any injury at all. Only a small cut had been inflicted on the palm of his right hand, blood dripping slowly from it. Seeing this scene, everyone went numb with shock. He Yufeng had been wounded. He Yufeng had actually been wounded. A pseudo-heavenly venerate, faced with a seventh-heaven celestial king, had actually been wounded by his opponent and was bleeding. Good heavens! Everyone was not concerned that Ling Han's wounds were more serious and what kind of price he had paid. They were only aware that a pseudo-heavenly venerate had been wounded by a seventh-heaven celestial king. This was a miracle that had never happened. This was a grand feat that no one had ever dared to imagine was possible. Ling Han was the one who had performed this miracle, and He Yufeng? He was destined to become an eternal afternote that would accompany Ling Han for his whole life. In the future, when anyone spoke of the grand feat that Ling Han had performed today, they would speak of He Yufeng as well, using his humiliation to show off just how freakish Ling Han was. This was Ling Han's fury as an ordinary man. Amazing! His fury was capable of making a pseudo-heavenly venerate bleed. Was there any other seventh heaven that could do the same? Heaven-born? No, he would only be able to ensure that he did not lose at most. Du Shi Amu can you? Perhaps if they presently exploded with ultimate moves, they could exchange it for a drop of blood from a pseudo-heavenly venerate, but when they had been only in the seventh heaven, that would have been merely a delusion. Ling Han smiled evenly, the blood and flesh of his body regrowing at an astonishing speed. The reason why he had come off so badly was actually mostly due to the conflict between the two heavenly venerate techniques inside his body, so this was considered self-inflicted injury. It would recover very quickly. Now, with the circulation of the indestructible heaven scroll, added with how Ling Han also had void particle energy, his recovery was naturally extraordinarily quick. Lord He, thank you for the guidance. He clasped his fists together. Though Ling Han was speaking very politely, He Yufeng felt his face burn. He knew that he was going to become an eternal joke, juxtaposed with Ling Han to show how freakish Ling Han was. He Yufeng's eyes burned with rage, killing intent blazing. He was going to kill Ling Han. He would definitely not allow him to leave this place alive. When others saw Ling Han in the future, they would speak of his great achievement today, and then step harshly on He Yufeng as well. That was definitely not allowed. He Yufeng was a man that was destined to become a heavenly venerate. How could he carry such a stain on his name? Die! He Yufeng roared in fury, green light surging from both his hands and pressing down on Ling Han. Ling Han was freakish. Not only had he clashed with a pseudo-heavenly venerate for 10 moves, he had even wounded the former, but after 10 moves, he was also at the end of the line. How could he now be able to block the vengeful counterattack of a pseudo-heavenly venerate? Yet Ling Han did not panic in the least, and merely looked calmly back at the other party. He Yufeng, you have gone too far. Lin Piaoxua moved. Her jade-like arms moved lightly, her fingers like plucked flowers. She looked like she did not hold any internal heat at all, but the might she displayed was extraordinary. Pum! She easily sent He Yufeng into retreat. Though both of them were pseudo-heavenly venerates, He Yufeng had just advanced to this cultivation level, while it was possible that Lin Piaoxua was about to advance to the next cultivation level. The gap in power between the two of them was extremely wide. He Yufeng took over 100 steps back before finally regaining his footing. His face was completely crimson due to the impact from the blow delivered by Lin Piaoxue, as well as fury. Was it really so difficult for a pseudo-heavenly venerate to kill a puny seventh heaven? You truly wish to offend our He clan for the sake of this brat? He Yufeng demanded menacingly. Hearing his words, Du Shi and the others shook their heads. With He Yufeng saying this, he meant to use his old man, Hirong, to exert pressure. They were all top-tier prodigies, and their own strength was their true foundation, the true basis for their pride and confidence. Yet He Yufeng had placed his old man on the table now. This actually was him admitting his own incompetence. This naturally garnered their disdain. Immediately, they removed He Yufeng from the list of people who could be their equal. Lin Piaoxue's pretty face was calm, her complexion fairer than snow. It was as if there was no life to her at all. She looked at He Yufeng, her eyes holding a slightly strange look, as if they were filled with sympathy. If you do not want to trifle with our He clan, leave immediately, He Yufeng demanded, pointing at the doors. Sigh, what a dumb brat. A voice rang out slowly. Big brother. The large black dog immediately jumped up. It was the black donkey. The black donkey walked over slowly. He maintained a human-like posture, his two front legs crossed behind him and his round belly exposed. His sleazy appearance was not much better than the large black dog's. Greetings, Lord Divine Donkey. Everyone hurriedly bowed in greeting, and even He Yufeng was no exception. Chapter 2680. 2,680 Competing in Fathers. Chapter 2680. 2,680 Competing in Fathers. 2680 Competing in Fathers. The black donkey was a heavenly venerate, not a pseudo-heavenly venerate. So what if He Yufeng had escaped the binds of regulations? The rule that would never disappear and that would exist eternally was only the strong would be respected. Everyone lowered their heads and paid their respects to the black donkey. Even Lin Piaoxue curtsied slightly. Uncle Donkey, Uncle Donkey. The black donkey walked over. Pa! He kicked out a hoof at He Yufeng, sending him onto the ground. He Yufeng was furious. For better or worse, he was also a pseudo-heavenly venerate, not much inferior to the black donkey, but the latter actually dared to humiliate him like this. Damn brat, I am saving you here. The black donkey stretched out a hoof to step on He Yufeng's face. If your father knew about this, he would probably have to send me flowers to thank me. Everyone's mouth twitched. This donkey was really caustic. He had already stepped on the other person, yet was actually still declaring that this was for the latter's own good. He Yufeng was naturally mad with fury. He swore that he would definitely inform his father of this. No matter how good your relationship with Zhouheng is, you still can't treat me like this. The black donkey snickered and rapped his hoof on He Yufeng's head. Brat, you are still not giving up? Fine then. I will let you die satisfied. You are using your own father to exert pressure on others. But do you know who her father is? He asked, pointing at Lin Piaoxue. Everyone couldn't help but prick their ears in anticipation, filled with curiosity. They also very much wanted to know what Lin Piaoxue's background was. To think that no one actually knew the origins of a pseudo-heavenly venerate. This kind of mystery would garner incredible curiosity in the first place. Who? He Yufeng asked stubbornly. Competing in fathers with others, sigh. You are truly too naive. The black donkey still kept them hanging. Only once everyone's neck was stretched out extensively did he finally say slowly, this little girl's father has the surname Lin. No kidding. Everyone was thinking this. Of course, not one of them dared to say this out loud. And he's going by the name Xiaoyang. The black donkey continued calmly. Lin Xiaoyang. Hiss, the sixth-tier heavenly venerate, Lord Lin Xiaoyang. Then that means wouldn't Lord Lin Luo then be her grandfather? The Lin clan, Lin Luo, is a 7th tier heavenly venerate, and his son Lord Lin Xiaoyang is a 6th tier heavenly venerate. His 2 disciples, Lord Zhou and Lord Yang Chu Hao, are both 6th tier heavenly venerates as well. He is a legend among legends. Competing in background with her, haha, this is truly hilarious. In the whole Genesis world, what other force can compare with the Lin clan? There may be some, but it definitely is not the He clan. Some were whispering quietly among themselves, but there were also others that did not have such reservations. That was because they, too, had 3rd tier, 4th tier, or even 5th tier heavenly venerate elders backing them up. What did they have to fear if it was just a few words of evaluation? Hiss! Another pseudo-heavenly venerate has emerged from the Lin clan. Then, many years later, they would have another heavenly venerate. This is only Lord Lin, Xiaoyang's daughter. I heard that Lord Lin Luo has a daughter as well, though she was born countless years after Lin Xiaoyang. Her natural talent is not the slightest bit weak, either. Perhaps she, too, has long since become a heavenly venerate. The strength of the Lin clan has reached an unimaginable height. He Yufeng also heard everyone's words and felt extremely embarrassed and angered, yet he did not have the slightest intention to refute what they were saying. Indeed, compared with the Lin clan, any other force was trash. A 7th tier heavenly venerate, 3 6th tier heavenly veneraticini, one of them would be able to conquer more than half of the Genesis world. If he truly became enemies with the Lin clan, his old man would probably kill him with his own hands, and then bring his head as a token of apology to the Lin clan. "Dumb brat, now do you know that I am saving you?" the black donkey asked. He Yufeng had to admit that it was indeed possible that the black donkey had resolved a danger for him, but using his hoof to step on his face was clearly a deliberate act to humiliate him. The donkey was completely capable of saying this nicely and politely, right? "Brother Ling, please come with me. Father wishes to meet you." Lin Piaoxue finally spoke, addressing Ling Han. She ignored He Yufeng completely. Perhaps a mere pseudo-heavenly venerate was not even worthy of her saying a few more words as far as she was concerned. He Yufeng lowered his head, his heart filled with resentment. This kind of disregard made him feel even worse than the black donkey humiliating him. However, he dared not resent Lin Piaoxue at all. The Lin clan was a colossal force that he definitely could not afford to trifle with. Hence, he relocated all his hatred and fury onto Ling Han. This was the real culprit. He Yufeng was determined to kill Ling Han. Ling Han first nodded at Lin Piaoxue, then looked towards He Yufeng and said, "Lord He, what you have bestowed on me today, I will remember dearly. In the future, I will definitely repay you." This naturally was not repaying kindness, but seeking vengeance. A mere 7th heaven. He Yufeng clenched his fists tightly, but he naturally could not be bothered to argue with Ling Han. If a pseudo-heavenly venerate still had to argue, that would be too demeaning of him. He merely humphed and said, "If I ever see you again, that will be the time of your death." Ling Han continued to express his thanks to the 2 celestial kings of the Wang clan, and only then did he exit the abode with a large black dog. "Come." Lin Piaoxue led the way, bringing Ling Han and the large black dog towards her vehicle. Shockingly, it was the carriage that was pulled by that yellow ox formed of divine metal. Ling Han and the large black dog exchanged a look, and both of them thanked their good luck. Thankfully, they had not really gone off to knock out the owners secretly. Otherwise, they would have crashed into a steel plate and would probably have been thrashed in return by now. "Senior Donkey, is the matter of the Celestial King graveyard already resolved?" Ling Han asked the black donkey. These days, Ling Han either would be cultivating in seclusion, or he would be concocting alchemical pills. He had not met the black donkey yet. The black donkey shook his head. That brat had run off really quickly. When Zhou Heng arrived, That place was already completely empty. Who knows where they had all run off to? Ling Han frowned. This was truly a lurking peril. The process of advancing to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier had been interrupted. This would definitely have serious effects. However, even if it was just ninth heaven celestial kings, with so many of them appearing at the same time, the destruction they could cause would also be incredibly frightening. Even if the sky fell down on us, there would be someone taller to hold it up. Just rest your worries and focus on cultivation. What is important now is to increase your strength as soon as possible, the black donkey said. Ling Han nodded. This time He Yufeng had used his strength as a pseudo-heavenly venerate to bully Ling Han, so the latter was infuriated, but it also filled him with fighting spirit at the same time. He was eager to increase his strength. The black donkey left, and Ling Han and the large black dog boarded the carriage. Celestial Maiden Lin, hearing your words, your father wishes to help me advance my cultivation level. Ling Han asked. Correct. Lin Piaoxua nodded. Then, can I bring a few more people with me? Ling Han immediately started bargaining. Who was Lin Xiaoyang, the son of a 7th-tier heavenly venerate, and he himself was also a 6th-tier heavenly venerate. When this kind of mighty figure said that he wanted to help Ling Han advance his cultivation level, it was definitely not just a joke. A good opportunity naturally could not be missed. Lin Piaoxua was surprised, and after being taken aback for a moment, she said, You may, but it is not everyone that can tolerate this kind of training. Let's give it a try. Ling Han invited the Rain Emperor. He naturally could not leave his brother out of this. Then he also brought the Empress and Bewitching Maiden Row with him. They were his wives. Additionally, the large black dog naturally would not be missing out on such benefits. Thus, the 4 people and 1 dog all rode in Lin Piaoshua's carriage, setting off to the Lin clan. On the way there, since they had some idle time, Ling Han couldn't help but ask, Celestial Maiden Lin has not enrolled into the martial academy? No. Though Lin Piaoxua had an astonishingly powerful background, she did not put on any airs at all. As gentle as water, she replied. Actually, descendants of truly great clans would not be enrolling into the martial academy. When they have trained to a certain extent in the clan, they would be sent to battle in the realm battlefield. As long as they can survive, their future prospects will be quite good as well. Just like her. Ling Han couldn't help but perk up. He had already heard of a great many things regarding the realm battlefield. All of a sudden, he really wanted to take a look there. Chapter 2681 2681 Pool of 9 Deaths. Chapter 2681 2681 Pool of 9 Deaths. 2681 Pool of 9 Deaths. If you go to the realm battlefield now, it is still too soon, Lin Piaoxua said seriously. The cruelty of the realm battlefield far surpasses your imagination. You must make even more adequate preparations. Ling Han nodded, and made no further mention of the realm battlefield. The carriage traveled very quickly. With a creature made of divine metal as horsepower, the speed was naturally amazing. It traveled from one spatial plane to the next, and they arrived at a mountain range over a dozen days later. After entering a specific doorway, the initially endless chain of mountains became even vaster, as if they had entered into a different world. They all disembarked from the carriage, and the golden ox sprawled out lazily, appearing extremely relaxed. The 5 of them strolled slowly onwards. There were structures on every mountain peak, and they could occasionally glimpse children laughing. They were not shy at all. Instead, they kept looking at Ling Han and the others, and the large black dog became the main focus of their attention. After all, it was extremely rare to see such a sleazy-looking dog wearing a pair of iron underwear. Aunt Xue, who are they? Aunt Xue, you're back. Great Aunt Xue, did you bring any nice food for us? The children all gathered round, chattering excitedly. Lin Piaoxua was as gentle as water. As she took out some things to distribute to these kids, She proceeded to make introductions for Ling Han and the others, about who this was and who that was. This was where the Lin clan was, but it was not just the Lin clan. It also included the relatives of the Lin clan. For example, Lin Piaoshua's maternal relatives all lived here. The members of the Lin clan numbered approximately in hundreds of thousands. There were countless celestial kings in the Lin clan, but there were only about 10 who had reached the heavenly venerable tier, which was a pitifully small number. With the guidance of a 7th tier heavenly venerate, the number of heavenly venerates was still that small. This showed just how hard it was to become a heavenly venerate. Led by Lin Piaoxue, Ling Han met with Lin Xiaoyang. This was the eldest son of Lin Luo, as well as the present clan leader of the Lin clan. Lin Luo, meanwhile, was constantly standing guard in the realm battlefield. A 7th tier heavenly venerate was the main force in defense against hysteria, so how could he possibly find the time to come back? Lin Xiaoyang looked to be in his 20s. He was young and handsome and had a slender build. He did not exude the slightest pressure and looked as ordinary as any other person. This was what it truly meant to return to one's true self. "Greetings, senior." Ling Han bowed respectfully. The Rain Emperor, bewitching Maiden Row, and the large black dog paid their respects as well, and even the Empress suppressed her pride and curtsied slightly. Lin Xiaoyang's temperament was very similar to that of his daughter, nonchalant and calm, as if he could never get angry. He waved a hand dismissively and said, "I have heard a lot about you. You are quite impressive. I, as well as junior brother Zhou, both have very great expectations of you." To think a 6th tier heavenly venerate would actually offer such high praise. If this was known to others, Ling Han would definitely become famous instantly. "I am not the type that enjoys listening to pleasantries. If you wish to repay me, then advance your cultivation level as soon as possible," Lin Xiaoyang said. "I have already opened the pool of 9 deaths for you. Piaoxue will bring all of you inside and explain how to use it." A 6th tier heavenly venerate was naturally very busy. Ling Han and the others all nodded. It was already very kind that Lin Xiaoyang had managed to find some time to meet with them. Lin Piaoxue led them away, and they very soon arrived at a mountain peak. There was a pool at the summit, and it was emitting green-colored fog filled with herbal essence. "This is the pool of 9 deaths," Lin Piaoxue said. Ling Han and the others were all surprised. This pool was filled with the aura of life, so it should be called the Pool of Life. Why would it be named the Pool of 9 Deaths instead? Lin Piaoxue shook her head. "All creations of the heaven and earth are amazing. In extreme death, life would be nurtured, and in extreme life, a great killing intent would also be hidden." She paused. "At the bottom of this pool, there is a divine tree. It was the origin of wood that transcended Tao and rushed to the height of 9th heaven. Unfortunately, it garnered the jealousy of heaven and earth, and when it attempted to break through to the heavenly venerable tier, it failed and died. The essence of the divine tree is abundant and is a supremely valuable medicine. But when the divine tree died, it was struck by the lightning of heaven and earth, so a boundless killing intent is also concealed within it. Afterwards, this pool was further refined by our clan elder, who inserted a considerable number of great herbs. Along with the power of a 7th tier heavenly venerate, the herbal essence in it has become more and more amazing. However, at the same time, the killing intent concealed within has also become more and more violent. If you enter, there is only a very narrow chance of survival," Lin Piaoxue said solemnly. "However, if you can survive the killing intent within the medicinal effects, the benefits will also be boundless." Ling Han looked towards the Empress, bewitching Maiden Row, and the Rain Emperor. The 3 of them nodded at him. "Why do you not look at Grandpa Dog?" the large black dog howled. "Do you people think that Grandpa Dog is the type to be afraid of death? We will remember this kindness deeply." Ling Han and the others all said to Lin Piaoxue, ignoring the large black dog completely. Lin Piaoxua nodded. It is all for the sake of the world. With the strength of the Lin clan, they actually no longer needed the gratitude of Ling Han and the others. Their motive was very simple, to oppose hysteria. You can enter into the pool to cultivate, and I will stand guard for all of you, she continued. Ling Han and the others were not reserved at all as they entered into the pool. Instantly, an extremely massive wave of life energy surged into their bodies, pushing their cultivation upwards quickly. Splash! The large black dog also jumped in. Damn dog, you are already at the peak stage of the 9th heaven. What have you come down for? I just want to absorb some nutrients. There's nothing bad about having some more, the large black dog answered shamelessly. Everyone was already long accustomed to how shameless the large black dog could be, so they did not say anything else, but rather concentrated on absorbing the energy inside the pool waters. But very quickly their expressions changed. This energy was too violent. At the beginning they could still tolerate it, but it very soon became a destructive tsunami that was raging violently in their bodies, practically crushing their bodies with extreme force. This was not just a feeling. Very soon they discovered marks of blood appearing on their bodies. That was a sign that the blood vessels in their bodies had burst. You must stay a full day inside the pool, or not only would it not be beneficial at all, it would instead result in harm, Lin Piaoxua said from the sidelines. Fuck, Grandpa Dog has been tricked. If I had known about this, I would not have come in. The large black dog yowled. He was already at the peak stage of the 9th heaven, so it was impossible that he would improve any further. He was just too greedy, and could not bear to see others benefit while he could only watch from the sidelines. Thus, he very shamelessly came down with them, and as a result he was suffering for nothing. Ling Han and the others were all holding on with gritted teeth, continuously absorbing the medicinal effects and turning them into progress for their cultivation level. After a day, the 4 people and 1 dog hurriedly leaped out, all of them panting endlessly, especially the large black dog. He was even tearing up. Come, attack me, Lin Piaoxua said. You guys need to move about to activate the medicinal effects completely. Otherwise, this kind of violent medicinal effect will accumulate in your bodies and exert a very strong effect on you. The 4 humans and 1 dog exchanged looks, and all of them moved, launching an offensive towards Lin Piaoxua. Though she looked unearthly, she was a dignified, great pseudo-heavenly venerate. If she really became serious, she would not need too many moves to wipe them all out. Now it was just to help Ling Han and the others move around for a bit, so Lin Piaoxua naturally would not go all out. Instead, she used herself as a target, and no matter how the 5 great elites ganged up on her, she merely dispersed their attacks and would not counter. They fought for a whole 10 days before she finally called a halt. Ling Han and the others inspected themselves and discovered that their cultivation level had actually progressed slightly. It was really a very tiny, small step forwards and was a little negligible. However, to have such progress in just 10 days was extremely shocking. Chapter 2682 2682 Peak of the 8th Heaven. Chapter 2682 2682 Peak of the 8th Heaven. 2682 Peak of the 8th Heaven. The medicinal effects had been refined, and the next step would be to enter into the pool of 9 deaths again to absorb some more. However, the facial expressions of the 4 people and 1 dog were extremely ugly. One couldn't just look at the exhilaration brought about by the increase in cultivation level. It was also extremely painful. They felt like they were almost about to collapse. No one would wish to experience it for a second time. Moreover, the pool of 9 deaths wasn't simply an exaggeration. A moment of carelessness would really cause death. Ling Han jumped in first. Needless to say, just thinking about He Yufeng's overbearing and domineering expression gave Ling Han endless motivation to trample on this bastard. This required strength, and the pool of 9 deaths would be able to give him strength. So what if he had to go through pain? After Ling Han, The Rain Emperor entered the pool without the slightest hesitation, followed by the Empress. She might be extremely tsundere, but her heart's desire to pursue strength was also extremely tenacious. Bewitching maiden Ro hesitated. She really wanted to be strong, but the thought of the pain she had endured before made her back down. The increase in cultivation level. There was no hurry, since there would always be Ling Han anyway. The large black dog was determined not to go into the pool. He had already been deceived once, so he definitely wouldn't want to go through it again. Lin Piaoxue then said, "Although you are at the peak of the 9th heaven, this pool of 9 deaths will still do you good. It can enhance your battle prowess and make it more refined." The large black dog grimaced, but after considering it for quite some time, he eventually entered the pool again. "It hurts Grandpa Dog to death. What kind of sin has Grandpa Dog committed?" he cried out loudly. Lin Piaoxue was utterly speechless. How could there be such a shameless guy? If you couldn't bear it, then you could choose not to enter. And yet after you entered the pool, you still kept screaming like a banshee. It really made one speechless. Everyone absorbed the medicinal effects for one day, and then used the next 10 days to refine the medicinal effects. Their cultivation soared. Half a year, 1 year, 10 years. Time flew. After more than 30 years, Lin Piaoxue stopped keeping watch over them because she found that the 3 people and 1 dog not only had great perseverance, but also top-notch strength and natural talent, and could completely withstand being washed by the medicinal effects. Furthermore, the group of 4, including Ling Han, could also battle one another to refine the medicinal effects, and no longer needed her to keep watch over them all the time. She was a pseudo-heavenly venerate. It was already enough that she had stood guard over them for more than 30 years. Ling Han and the others continued to cultivate, enduring the suffering inflicted upon their bodies, and marching forward despite going through extreme difficulties. During this period, the 4 of them had experienced several dangerous obstacles which nearly cost them their lives. Fortunately, their willpower was extremely strong, and they survived. 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, and finally 700,000 years had passed in the blink of an eye. Ling Han had reached the peak of the 7th heaven, and was qualified to charge towards the 8th heaven. There was no need to temper his foundations any longer, as the 4 were experiencing life and death situations on a daily basis. So their foundations were naturally solid. There was also no need to have a trigger for their breakthrough, as they were engaging in battles almost every day. Moreover, their evolution index was either 11 or 12, so breaking through was naturally something that was only a matter of course. Ling Han took his leave. First, though, was to go through his tribulation. His 8th heaven tribulation already possessed the power of the peak of the 9th heaven, but this was basically the limit. When Ling Han broke through to the 9th heaven in the future, the tribulation that he would go through might only be at this level. Even if the might of the tribulation would be slightly greater than this, there was no way it would be much greater. Kwang. Heaven and earth exhibited its power to stop Ling Han from going one step further. However, since Ling Han had cultivated the indestructible celestial king physique to great accomplishments level, his physique was only slightly worse off than divine metal. Heavenly tribulation could strike him until he was drenched in blood, but that would be about it. It wouldn't be able to go any further. 1 day later, the heavenly tribulation dissipated. Yet Ling Han did not show any sign of relaxing. Even at the 8th heaven, he was still unable to contend with a pseudo-heavenly venerate, so he still needed to continue improving. Back at the pool of 9 deaths, Ling Han buried himself in cultivation. Hundreds of thousands of years later, the Empress and the Rain Emperor broke through respectively. Time flew. 7 million years later, Ling Han had advanced his cultivation to the peak of the 8th heaven, but he had encountered a bottleneck and was unable to push through the doors to reach the 9th heaven. On the contrary, the Empress and the Rain Emperor were making great progress, and they were about to catch up to him in cultivation level. Little Han, 9th heaven is the limit of the regulations. This level is not so easy to break through, the large black dog said. You need to experience the world and understand the regulations before you can take this final step. Ling Han nodded. Monarch stars would be able to enter the ninth heaven without any difficulty, but this did not mean that he could watch his cultivation level soar just by sitting still. One would still need to go through the necessary route, and the required process could not be dispensed with. It was just that for some people, even if they were to take such a route, they might never be able to reach the end, and yet Ling Han could not only walk smoothly, but also reach the end very quickly. Grandpa Dog is almost finished here. It's time for us brothers to go out. Brat, when you reach the ninth heaven, you will probably be able to battle even pseudo-heavenly venerates, the large black dog roared. Defeat that little bastard, He Yufeng. He has only entered the pseudo-heavenly venerate realm slightly earlier. There's nothing great about it. Ling Han nodded and decided to leave with the large black dog first, whereas the Empress, Bewitching Maiden Row, and the Rain Emperor would continue with their cultivation here. Bewitching Maiden Row would occasionally enter the pool of 9 deaths for cultivation, but the time that she spent entering once was enough for the others to enter more than a dozen times. So the increase in her cultivation level was far from that of Ling Han and the others. The Empress and the others agreed that Ling Han and the large black dog would leave and return to the Martial Academy first. After more than 10 days of traveling in haste, the duo returned to the Martial Academy. In the blink of an eye, more than 7 million years had passed, and the great commotion caused by Ling Han previously had naturally subsided a long time ago. However, when people occasionally noted the names of Zhang San or Li Si on the Eternal Stone, it would make people lament that there had once been an extremely impressive character with the cultivation level of 7th heaven who had injured a pseudo-heavenly venerate within the Martial Academy. Of course, if not for the people who were present at that time, most of the others would still doubt the incident's authenticity. How could a 7th heaven celestial king hurt a pseudo-heavenly venerate? Ling Han and the large black dog were very low-key and quietly entered the Martial Academy without attracting anyone's attention. However, the Martial Academy was only so big, and no matter how low-key the team of 1 person and 1 dog was, they were still noticed, and this soon caused a wave within the Martial Academy. However, the grand event that everyone had anticipated for Ling Han to battle against He Yufeng once again did not take place, as He Yufeng had left the Martial Academy millions of years ago already, and it was said that he had gone to the realm battlefield. He Yufeng had naturally been aggravated, but it was definitely not because of Ling Han. No matter how freakish a 7th heaven celestial king was, it wouldn't make him have a sense of urgency. Rather, it was due to Lin Piaoxue, who was also a pseudo-heavenly venerate. He Yufeng felt incomparably small in front of Lin Piaoxue, which prompted him to firmly resolve himself to go to the realm battlefield, seeking to improve his battle prowess through bloody battles. That bastard should consider himself lucky, otherwise Grandpa Dog would surely beat him to death, the large black dog shouted after he breathed out a sigh of relief. Ling Han shook his head. Although our strength has improved by leaps and bounds, it is still impossible to overcome the obstacle that is the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. We are definitely not He Yufeng's match. At that time, Ling Han had used 2 heavenly venerate techniques at the same time at the cost of injuring himself, but it had merely caused He Yufeng to sustain a slight injury and bleed a little. Given that he had now advanced his cultivation level to the next level, He Yufeng would be slightly more injured at most. Furthermore, He Yufeng had taken the blow because he had been afraid of losing face at the time, while he could have dodged it completely in reality. If Ling Han was to fight He Yufeng again, would the other party still be limited by an agreement of 10 moves? However, as long as I can make it to 9th heaven... Ling Han's eyes flashed with cold light. At that time, he would have no fear of even a pseudo-heavenly venerate. Chapter 2683. 2680. 3 Divine Demon Sword Undergoes Tribulation. Chapter 2683. 2683 Divine Demon Sword Undergoes Tribulation. 2680. 3 Divine Demon sword undergoes tribulation. Ling Han believed that when he reached the ninth heaven, he would have the strength to battle against a pseudo-heavenly venerate. This was because he had been tempered by void particle energy all this while. In fact, he had long been a pseudo-heavenly venerate, but it was unknown how large the gap in strength between him as a pseudo-heavenly venerate and a real pseudo-heavenly venerate was. However, once Ling Han entered the ninth heaven, and he wouldn't even need to reach the peak, he would then truly be able to stand on the same level as a pseudo-heavenly venerate. And should he reach the peak of the ninth heaven, then he would become a pseudo-heavenly venerate through and through, with the ability to absolutely crush other pseudo-heavenly venerates. Why was this? This was because other pseudo-heavenly venerates used the unique power of heaven and earth to temper their bodies, but Ling Han used void particle energy. Void particle energy was one of the 6 fundamental powers of the Genesis world, and was naturally more powerful than the said unique power. This was superiority in terms of quality. The problem now was that Ling Han had to break through to the ninth heaven first. Soon, a visitor from the Wang clan arrived again. It was still Wang Yangming, who continued to cooperate with Ling Han on behalf of the Wang clan. After millions of years, the Wang clan had collected sufficient divine metal. You actually broke through to the 8th heaven. Wang Yangming was stunned. He knew that Ling Han was extremely freakish, and his strength was so powerful that he could even injure a pseudo-heavenly venerate. But now this guy advanced from the 7th heaven to the 8th heaven within 10 million years. This speed was indeed overwhelming. Ling Han nodded, and didn't say that he had actually reached the peak of the 8th heaven, and was only 1 step away from breaking through to the 9th heaven. What he lacked now was just an opportunity. The two chatted for a while. Ling Han once again expressed his gratitude to the Wang clan, while Wang Yangming also expressed his hope to have a deeper cooperation with Ling Han and to forge a deeper relationship, for example, by marrying a certain little princess of their clan, causing Ling Han's face to involuntarily darken. Damn, it has been so long ago, but the Wang clan still hasn't forgotten about it. After Wang Yangming left, Ling Han began to upgrade the divine demon sword. This time round, the Wang clan had sent over a dozen pieces of divine metal in one go, which should be enough for the divine demon sword to advance to the next level. After learning that news, the large black dog was also very excited and ran over to witness the event. As Ling Han took out the divine demon sword, the devouring metal activated instinctively, and it immediately began to devour the divine metal. In the face of devouring metal, as tough as divine metal was, it could only be easily swallowed, and as the essence in it was completely extracted, it turned into dust. 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3 pieces, as more and more divine metal was swallowed by the divine demon sword. This celestial tool exuded a blazing light, and ancient characters started to appear, but they could not be deciphered. Little Han, don't miss out a single word. The large black dog opened his eyes wide. This is the Heavenly Venerable Seals, a language that only Heavenly Venerates can understand, and it can communicate with the fundamental power of the Genesis world. However, the Heavenly Venerates can understand it, but can't manifest it. Only when devouring metal is upgraded to the Heavenly Venerable tier will it stimulate the heaven and earth, which will manifest these supreme characters. Ling Han hurriedly widened his eyes with rapt attention. He quickly discovered that the indestructible Heaven Scrolls contents that he had seen on the Black Tower were somewhat similar to these characters, but they were far less complicated and profound. The Heavenly Venerates naturally had a glimpse of the essence of the Genesis world, and the amazing techniques which they created might be a different approach leading to the same desired effect. It was just that karmic life Heavenly Venerable had merely taken only 1 step, after all, so at most he would have gotten insight into some kind of fundamental power of the celestial realm. So the technique which he had created was not as profound as this. But thanks to this, the karmic life Heavenly Venerable could pass down the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Otherwise, even a Heavenly Venerate wouldn't be able to write it down. Ling Han couldn't understand it at all, but he gained a lot of insight because he realized that as long as such characters floated in his mind, the efficiency of the void particle energy within him increased many times over. It originally took 1,000 years to sense and extract a void particle, but now it would only take 10 years. It had actually increased by 100-fold. This was mighty amazing indeed. Ling Han was overjoyed at the unexpected turn of events. Even if these characters of the Heavenly Venerate had no other effect, and just improved his ability to sense a void particle, it was already enough. Boom! The divine demon sword suddenly released immeasurable celestial light, tearing the sky apart. The surging of thunderclouds could be seen, and the heavenly tribulation was quickly taking shape. Little Han, run quickly. A Heavenly Venerate tool will face a tribulation, and with our strength, staying nearby is courting death. The large black dog quickly grabbed Ling Han and ran, his face turning white with fright. Ling Han didn't dare to hesitate, and immediately ran after him. Xiao, the divine demon's sword shot straight into the sky, facing the heavenly tribulation. There were bursts of lightning, falling towards the divine demon's sword one after another, very close in timing and extremely terrifying. 1,000 instances of tempering, surpassing the level of divine metal. The large black dog sighed. In the past, Grandpa Dog has seen the karmic life Heavenly Venerable refine the Tower of Three Realms. But at that time, the Lord became a Heavenly Venerate, so he could help the Tower of Three Realms fight against the heavenly tribulation together. But now it is all up to the divine demon's sword itself. If it can survive, it will truly transcend. Failing, it will turn into dust. Ling Han said nothing. He just looked up at the sky with a firm resolve in his eyes. Ling Han believed that the divine demon's sword would definitely be able to survive because it was a precious tool that he had refined himself. With it following him all the way for so many years, his character had been completely integrated into it. Hence, the more setbacks it encountered, the stronger it would become. A Heavenly Venerate tool was facing tribulation, so the commotion was so great that the entire martial academy was alerted. Even the 2 Heavenly Venerates who were in charge also opened their eyes and looked into the sky. The layers of bricks and tiles could not block their vision. There is going to be another new Heavenly Venerate tool emerging. That's strange. There is no 3rd Heavenly Venerate here. Could it be that this Heavenly Venerate tool was actually refined by a celestial king? How daring! Are they not fearful of the ruthless heavenly tribulation blasting the core of the precious tool to smithereens, leaving nothing? The 2 Heavenly Venerates sighed, and then withdrew their gazes. They were veteran Heavenly Venerates. Naturally, they had already refined Heavenly Venerate tools in their own realms, and would not have any ideas about the divine demon's sword. Of course, had it not been for the fight against hysteria, which made all the Heavenly Venerates put aside their prejudices and come together, then they would definitely have taken action to snatch the sword. Who would think that having another Heavenly Venerate tool would be too much? One day later, the heavenly tribulation dissipated. Pa! The divine demon's sword fell from the sky, with only 1/3 of the blade remaining, and the whole thing appeared dull and dim. Sure enough, without the master's support, it couldn't survive. The 2 Heavenly Venerates opened their eyes again and shook their heads. Others in the martial academy had also witnessed it. Even if not all of them recognized this to be a Heavenly Venerate tool facing tribulation, they were also thinking that the divine demon's sword had failed to ascend to the next level and naturally no longer paid any attention to it. This world had always been like this. Only the successful would be famous for an eternity, while losers would only be immediately swept into the dust of history. The divine demon's sword fell and landed beside Ling Han's feet, the whole blade appearing dull and having lost all its consciousness. It actually failed. The large black dog was filled with disappointment. He had been looking forward to the advancement of the divine demon's sword, and that it would suppress Heavenborn in the future, releasing the spirit of the karmic life, heavenly venerable. This had already become his obsession, but now that divine demon sword failed to advance to the next level. It naturally made him extremely disappointed. Ling Han bent down, picked up the divine demon sword, and shook his head, saying, "I don't believe it would fail." He possessed such confidence. First, it was because the heavenly tribulation had lasted for a whole day, so the divine demon sword had indeed survived the heavenly tribulation. Second, this was something that was integrated with his martial intent, his firm and indomitable conviction. So how could it fail? Chapter 2684 2684 Yun Aokong. Chapter 2684 2684 Yun Aokong. 2684 Yun Aokong. The large black dog grabbed the divine demon sword and looked it over repeatedly, yet ended up shaking his head. There is no life to it at all anymore. He gave a flick with his paw. Pa! A section of the blade fell down just like that, and with a stomp from him, it immediately turned into dust. This toughness, just how many times was it inferior to divine metal? Ling Han took the sword from him and circulated his divine sense carefully through it. As expected, this divine sword that had originally been filled with life and sharpness had become dead and heavy. There was not the slightest sliver of reaction from it, and it had also lost the sturdy structure of the divine demon sword. It was loose and lax. To say nothing of Ling Han, even if it was just a 3-year-old child, a light tap would probably turn the divine demon sword into the dust of history. Had it really been so madly struck by the heavenly tribulation that it had been completely finished? Ling Han could not believe it. He scanned the blade over and over again. The large black dog sighed, turned and left. Since the divine demon sword could not advance to become a supreme heavenly venerate tool, then going to get another was not a realistic plan. They could only wait until either one of them broke through to the heavenly venerable tier. By then, it would be possible to suppress Heavenborn. However, it was possible that this time would come a considerable number of years later. Ling Han would not give up. He kept holding on to his faith. The divine demon sword could be considered a secondary body of his, possessing his unique trait of becoming stronger when encountering setbacks. How could it have possibly been struck dead with just a heavenly tribulation? 3 days later, Ling Han's divine sense had already flowed tens of thousands of times through the divine demon sword. Suddenly, he touched a point. This point was negligible, and it was extremely easy for him to pass it by in a flash. Yet Ling Han discovered that there was a sliver of life left inside this point. He studied it carefully, and a hint of a smile appeared at the corners of his lips a while later. This kind of life surpassed divine metal. Though there was just a sliver, it could suppress all in terms of quality. The divine demon sword had indeed survived the heavenly venerate tribulation, but because it had not had the protection of its master, it had also been incredibly difficult for it to undergo the heavenly venerate tribulation. Paying the price of being practically completely destroyed, the sword had managed to survive. Thus, after undergoing the heavenly tribulation, it had not shone in brilliance. Instead, it was like it had failed to survive the heavenly tribulation and had directly dropped down from the skies, so everyone thought that it had failed. But even if it had succeeded, this price was too great. Practically the whole sword had been destroyed and turned into scrap metal. It's fine. As long as the core is there, it can be repaired. Ling Han thought, even for a cultivator, as long as they had survived the heavenly tribulation, no matter how severe the injuries, they could be healed. By then, their strength would soar and surpass their previous strength completely. Once the divine demon sword was repaired, it would be a truly supreme, heavenly venerable tool, and advance to that strongest level. Ling Han did not inform the large black dog, and decided to wait until the divine demon sword recovered to give this guy a surprise. Next, Ling Han began concocting alchemical pills. Since he had already accepted fees from the Long clan, he should deliver upon the promised time. Moreover, the The Wang clan had previously supported him even if it meant becoming enemies with the He clan. Ling Han had to acknowledge this debt. After working for several months, Ling Han finally completed his mission. When Wang Yangming came, Ling Han asked him about the recent events in the martial academy. Aside from the fact that He Yufeng had gone to the realm battlefield, so had Heavenborn. Heavenborn was still a seventh heaven, but why was he able to go to the realm battlefield? That naturally was because his physique was too amazing. His physique was at the level of divine metal, and his defenses went all the way up to the pseudo-heavenly venerable tier. Thus, as long as he was being careful, he would still be able to help here and there at the realm battlefield at the very least. Ling Han hesitated. Should he go to the realm battlefield? He had not made his decision yet, but the news of his return had already spread out in the martial academy, which also caused some people to pay him a visit. Just a few days later, a person appeared in front of his abode. It was like someone was about to die. He was banging strongly and loudly at Ling Han's door. This was too vulgar. Ling Han opened the doors and saw a young man that looked to be in his 20s standing in the doorway. There were 4 ribbons of iridescent light wrapped around him. His vitality, very energetic and filled with heroic spirit. This man was very handsome, but it was unfortunate that the pride in his expression was too strong. It was as if he was looking down in disdain on the rest of the world, as if everyone should kneel down in front of him. "So you are Ling Han?" this young man asked boldly. "Pa!" Ling Han sent a slap right over. How could that young man manage to dodge? Immediately he was sent to the ground with this strike, passing out completely. How rude! Ling Han shook his head, though he was using his superior strength to bully someone weaker, and had been the first to make a move. The fact that a mere 4th heaven dared to treat an 8th heaven celestial king like this was in itself an act of provocation. Even if he was beaten, he would deserve it. Ling Han had no worries that he had broken the rules of the martial academy. Moreover, Ling Han was just quietly staying at home and hadn't trifled with anyone. Wasn't the other party just asking to be beaten? Ling Han slammed the doors shut and returned, continuing to nurture the divine demon sword. This sword had the same origins as Ling Han. His martial intent could stimulate the recovery of the divine demon sword, and this was something that only he could do. That young man simply lay like that at Ling Han's doors. There would be people passing by now and then, and when they saw this, they couldn't help but feel amused. Isn't that Yun Aokong from the Yun clan? A 4th heaven monarch star, and the Yun clan has placed very high hopes on him. Why would he be lying here? Isn't this the abode of Ling Han, that bringer of calamity? Hiss, Yun Aokong must have angered Ling Han, and that is why he has been knocked out. But there doesn't seem to have been any conflicts between him and Ling Han, right? I don't get it. When this news spread out, a great many people who had planned to visit Ling Han gave up that idea. How could Ling Han be so overbearing? Even the young master of the Yun clan was not worthy of entering. Though Yun Aokong was only a 4th heaven celestial king, the grand elder of the Yun clan was a 3rd tier heavenly venerate. Could it be that Ling Han was really related to the Lin clan? Otherwise, how could he be so domineering? Yun Aokong only regained consciousness after being out cold for 3 whole days. He hurriedly scrambled to his feet, his expression slightly dazed, but immediately he flew into a fury out of humiliation. He had actually been knocked unconscious here. Though he did not know how long had passed, it would definitely not have been any short period of time. There were definitely others that had witnessed his embarrassment. Damn! Pung, pung, pung! He began knocking on the doors again. After a while, the doors could finally be seen opening, revealing that face of Ling Han that was filled with impatience. Ling Han, you are too arrogant. I am of the Yun clan. Pung! Ling Han's hand descended, and another slap knocked Yun Aokong unconscious. He could not be bothered with whatever Yun clan, Ma clan, or whatchamacallit. At the moment, his focus was completely on mending the divine demon sword. There just happened to be people who witnessed this, and the news instantly spread throughout the whole martial academy. The young master of the Yun clan had been knocked out at Ling Han's door 2 times in a row. When everyone heard this news, they first erupted into laughter and then shook their head. Ling Han was truly one who dared to oppose a pseudo-heavenly venerate. He did not even take the Yun clan to heart. True, the He clan also had a grand elder that was a 4th-tier heavenly venerate, and Ling Han was still not seen to hold much fear either. Another 3 days later, Yun Aokong slowly came back to his senses. His whole face was flushed crimson, and his expression darkened. As the most outstanding heir of the present generation of the Yun clan, he had naturally grown up under the protection of countless people since childhood. Furthermore, who would not give some face to a 3rd-tier heavenly venerate? Thus, he had never encountered any setbacks before. But in this place he had been knocked out before he had even finished speaking, and was just lying at another's door like that, exposed completely to the elements. He really was about to go crazy. However, remembering his mission, Yun Aokong forcefully suppressed his fury. He could not just return miserably like this, after all, right? He knocked on the doors again, but he was using much less force this time. He had finally learned his lesson. Chapter 2685, 2685 Old Debts. Chapter 2685, 2685 Old Debts. 2685 Old Debts. A while later, Ling Han came out to open the doors. Ling Han, I am of the Yun. Pung. The unfortunate Yun Aokong spoke just a few words before being knocked out again. 3 days later, he slowly came to for the 3rd time. His first reaction was to kill Ling Han, and he was going to swallow and skin him alive at that, but remembering how he had been knocked out 3 times in a row, he finally woke up to reality. Ling Han was a great man who dared to oppose even a pseudo-heavenly venerate. Actually, he had not believed in this kind of rumor. For a 7th heaven celestial king to be capable of wounding a pseudo-heavenly venerate, wasn't that the greatest joke in the world? But now he was starting to believe it. At the very least, this guy's courage was indeed astonishingly great. With such thoughts, Yun Aokong had finally learned his lesson, and knocked cautiously on the doors. The doors opened and Ling Han appeared. I am Yun Aokong. Greetings, senior brotherling. Yun Aokong corrected his attitude and bowed towards Ling Han with his fists clasped together. He was feeling uneasy. He wouldn't be knocked out with 1 strike again, would he? He had already been traumatized. In the end, Ling Han made no further move. After these few times, this young man finally understood the meaning of rules and how to respect others. He asked, "What is it?" Yun Aokong's mouth twitched a bit. He had been knocked out 3 times and finally managed to get a chance to speak seriously. It had truly been very difficult. Thinking of his business here, his arrogance returned. I have come on behalf of the Yun clan to ask Senior Brotherling to concoct alchemical pills for us for 100 million years for free. Pah! His words had just fallen, and he was once again knocked out cleanly by Ling Han. Ling Han gritted his teeth. Even if they came to him, bearing various kinds of natural treasures, concocting alchemical pills would still be up to his mood at the time. Had every single member in this Yun clan had their heads kicked by a donkey? They actually demanded that he concoct alchemical pills for them for 100 million years for free. Fuck idiots. At present, he no longer needed divine metal. What he needed was ingredients that could help boost his physique to the level of indestructible divine metal physique. These might not be as valuable as divine metal, but they were strange and rare, and the difficulty level of obtaining such materials had increased several hundred times over. He had asked the Wang clan to search on his behalf, but it was possible that he would not be able to collect all of them even after several 100 million years. Thus, even if the Yun clan had come with divine metal as well, he would not give them any regard, what more when they were demanding that he do it for free. Did they think he was stupid? This time, Ling Han's force was considerably stronger because Yun Aokong only regained consciousness after 7 days. Shaking his head, he raised a hand to rub his head, and his expression became livid. By now, his head was as swollen as a pumpkin. Ling Han, he forced out through gritted teeth. But he hadn't said all he had come to say. There was no way he would return just like this, so he could only knock on the doors again. The doors opened to reveal Ling Han. "Don't move. Let me finish my words," Yun Aokong hurriedly exclaimed, and even used his arms to protect his head. He was really traumatized by the repeated strikes. Seeing how Ling Han had not hit him, he hurriedly exclaimed, "Don't think that our Yun clan has gone too far. Our Grand Elder has said that you should not forget that the Celestial King graveyard was destroyed on your account." Ling Han was slightly taken aback before realization immediately dawned on him. When he came back to report the matter of Desolate Moon's conspiracy, causing Zhou Heng to step in and forcefully destroy the Celestial King graveyard, only a limited few people had managed to leave alive. That was because the majority of them had already been affected by the black qi, which was Hysteria's willpower, so they could only be killed. Actually, he had done them a great service. Otherwise, if tens of thousands of pseudo-heavenly venerates appeared, who knew what kind of frightening damage would be caused? However, some forces thought that it was Ling Han who had cut off one of their sources of income, Ascending Dragon Pill. Outside, no one dared to sell Ascending Dragon Pills openly because this thing was really too filthy. It was formed by being irrigated with the blood and flesh of celestial kings. But these great forces could use it to boost the strength of their own clansmen. When they were all strong, they naturally had a greater say in things, and could then earn even more profits. For the sake of this, they had even sent their own clansmen there, and one example was the Azure Ghost Celestial King. But with the trouble caused by Ling Han, the Celestial King graveyard was completely gone, which naturally cut off the supply of Ascending Dragon Pills as well. It was definite that a great many forces would be angered by this. The Yun clan was the first to seek him out for a reckoning. They could not demand compensation from Ling Han directly. After all, the matter of the Celestial King graveyard could not be discussed openly. Thankfully, Ling Han was also a great alchemist, so they had gotten the idea to demand him to concoct alchemical pills for them for 100 million years for free. How truly delusional. Pa! Ling Han knocked Yun Aokong out with another smack. 9 days later, Yun Aokong finally regained consciousness. This time he did not knock on the doors again, but rather turned and left. He had finally said all he had come to say. Since Ling Han was being so stubborn, he'd just wait to meet the fury of the Yun clan. However, just to say these few simple words, Yun Aokong had actually been knocked out 5 times. Just the thought of it depressed him, and he was cursing Ling Han half to death in his heart. After Yun Aokong left, another few people paid Ling Han a visit. They either were polite or would be threatening. However, all they said was more or less the same, and that was demanding that he compensate them for the losses incurred due to the destruction of the Celestial King graveyard by concocting alchemical pills for them for free. Ling Han naturally ignored all of them. Be it beating them up or chasing them away, he did all of it. If it were not for the fact that it was not proper to kill people in the martial academy, he really would rather be merciless so that he could finally get some peace. After Yun Aokong and the others returned and described Ling Han's attitude, it naturally garnered the great displeasure of the various great forces. As they saw it, Ling Han had ruined the Celestial King graveyard, and now he was actually going to slip away, forgetting the matter entirely. How could there be such a good thing in this world? Not long after, a great many Ninth Heaven celestial kings entered into the martial academy, planning to deal with Ling Han. As for the heavenly venerates, all the heavenly venerates had gone to the realm battlefield as per their agreement. They could only return for a period of rest after battling countless years. Thus, whether you were a 3rd tier, 4th tier, or 5th tier heavenly venerate force, there was no way you could ask for the interference of a heavenly venerate. Moreover, What kind of big deal was this? To ask a third tier or fourth tier heavenly venerate to interfere just to deal with a seventh heaven celestial king. Naturally, they did not know that Ling Han had already advanced to the eighth heaven. When ninth heaven celestial kings moved, as long as there were enough of them, they could even oppose a pseudo-heavenly venerate. So suppressing a puny seventh heaven celestial king was naturally no issue. Inside the abode, Ling Han breathed out a long sigh of relief. He spread open his hand, and a small sword lay in his palm. It really was very small, not even half an inch long. But though it might look small, it emanated a frightening aura, and even heavenly venerates would be moved. A heavenly venerate tool. With Ling Han's nurturing, the divine demon sword had already recovered to the present size from its initial size of a point. It was growing up just like a child. Pung, pung, pung. Right at this moment, a knock rang out from the doors again. Ling Han sighed. Was he really too amicable? And that was why people kept coming to cause trouble for him. He stood up, and the divine demon sword was also immediately covered with rust. Its size rapidly grew. These bits of metal had all fallen off the divine demon sword, so they had a certain level of nurturing effects as well. He went out to open the doors. Amazing, there were actually over 39th heaven celestial kings standing at his doorway. All of them had unleashed their auras, having absolutely no reservations. Aside from them, there were also young people like Yun Aokong. They, on the other hand, were standing very far away, all of them crossing their arms over their chests and looking coldly at Ling Han. They wanted nothing more than to watch Ling Han be stomped into the ground, because they were all victims and had suffered before in Ling Han's hands. Ling Han, you are truly outrageously bold. You still refuse to confess your crimes after causing such great trouble? A ninth heaven celestial king spoke up in rebuke, directly finalizing Ling Han's crime. Ling Han smiled slightly. It is best not to expose the matter of the celestial king graveyard. If you guys get lost now, I will not be bothered to drop to the same level as you guys, either. Otherwise, do not blame me for being ruthless.